Hello, Avatar fans, and welcome to the next episode of the Avatar Online podcast. This is going to be a podcast special, our review special for Avatar The Last Airbender North and South Part 2, the latest Avatar comic that is to come out, the middle part of the North and South trilogy. I'm going to be your main host for this podcast, Morgan Airspeed Prime, site super moderator for Avatar The Last Airbender Online.com. The site that hosts this podcast. Joining me first on the podcast is Greg2B from the site.
What's up, everyone?
And also joining us is Kelly Gemini530 from the site.
Hi, everyone.
Excellent. So, since it's a special, that's all we're going to be discussing this week. It's just North and South Part 2. For anyone wondering about the details in this book, comic books are release date January 25th, 2017. Regular bookstore release date, online, digital, everywhere else, is February 7th. So, first of all, I suppose the details on this book are North and South Part 2 is the name, of course, written by Jean Luen Yang, colors and art by Team Gurihuru, letters by Michael Heisler as ever, and published by Dark Horse Comics, of course. So we'll start with general overall thoughts on the book, kind of non-spoiler style. Then we'll get into our kind of like read through, analyzing it page by page kind of situation after this. So I've obviously kind of put out my like early reviews and stuff like that, so most people probably know my general thoughts on the book. But Greg, what are your thoughts overall, general, on the book?
Sorry about that. Overall, I really like it. I think it does a really good job of sort of continuing the story and sort of bringing in sort of our characters that we have sort of been, expecting to sort of come into the story. So it was nice how they sort of introduced them as well, sort of pass on the story as well as, sort of, I guess, sort of get to the real sort of meat of the story. I don't know, I think at some points I might have expected a little bit more, but I think it does a good job of sort of wanting you to sort of figure out sort of what happened. I mean, I don't know if the sort of ending is as sort of, I don't know, as interesting as the first one. I think there are some parts at like the later part of the book that I think are really, really cool, or really sort of things that you wouldn't sort of expect. But overall, I think I really liked it.
And Kelly, what are your general thoughts on the book?
Yeah, I really liked it. It had a lot of interesting dialogue. It continued the plot in an interesting way. Not a lot was happening, but also a lot was happening, so it's kind of weird how to describe it. But overall, I think it was pretty good. And again, animation just keeps getting better. And some good stuff, yeah.
My general thoughts are that I really like the book. It's a really good part 2. It's not perfect in the sense that like I feel like it's left part 3 with like a ton of stuff to do, and that it kind of, I felt like part 2 would cover a little bit more ground, and that as we go through it, we'll kind of see that there's not a ton of like plot to this one. It's like one event happens and that kind of changed people's opinion on things, and that's kind of like the core of what it's about. In that like one or two scenes are just like really long and extended ones, so we don't cover a ton of ground, and like some of the characters that kind of return back into the story maybe don't get the time they need. But part 3 is still available for like a lot more stuff to happen. But in general, I think there are a lot of really interesting character stuff that are really good scenes. But yeah, we'll move into the kind of full spoiler analysis now, going through it page by page. And yeah, so we'll start off here. Our opening scene. We don't follow up immediately with the aftermath of part 1 with Katara and Sokka's opinions on Hakoda and Molina kissing. We move on a little bit after that, potentially like the following day or later that day, clearly in that Hakoda and some of his troops are investigating, basically, clearly based off information that Katara and Sokka have given them about Gilak and his forces and where they're hiding out underneath the Fire Nation ship. So we basically have Hakoda and his troops enter the ship. They go through the trapdoor that Katara and Sokka fell through. They're in there looking around. Everyone has abandoned the place. No one's there anymore. Gilak and everyone else has left. Hakoda notes that Gilak is kind of very clever, and of course he'd kind of do something like this. And the big thing that we get here is that one of the troops discovers markings on the wall, and we get the translation that that the message to Hakoda is, "Soon I will show you the truth, chieftain." So we already knew about this from the preview kind of description of the book, and the preview that did come out a few days ago showed these scenes. So we already knew about this, but still, it's interesting that we get it here. But Greg, any thoughts on the opening kind of 4 pages of the book here?
Um, I liked it. I thought it was cool that they showed the haunted ship, which is always, such an iconic thing for all sort of Avatar fans, and the fact that, we get to see Hakoda sort of entering it and, sort of get to hear a little bit about sort of Gilak's sort of, I guess, sort of background, which we find out, even more about later on in the book, which I think is pretty cool just to sort of get to know our sort of villain type character. But no, it's definitely very sort of, it sets the stage pretty well. I like how it, sets the tone with the message on the wall, which is, it's very sort of ominous. So I think it does a good job of, getting us into the story.
Yeah, like I like it that it shows that Gilak was clever in that, given that Sokka and Katara escaped, he immediately changed locations because he knew that they'd tell where he was, and that him knowing Hakoda so well that he would come for him, so he leaves the message. It was a nice thing and kind of just sets the tone that like we're expecting in part 2 Gilak to show up at some point and something big to happen. So it's actually a really good opening scene in that sense. But Kelly, your thoughts on this first couple of pages?
Yeah, it's pretty good. The first page actually I find kind of funny because it reminds me of that moment in book two where all the warriors slide down the side of the hill. I guess it's just a thing that Water Tribe people do. Like, let's go, slide down. It's like that's like take the high ground. I don't know. It's funny to me. I find it funny they don't like run on the floor. They know how to use their environment for their advantage, especially with this ship. Which, yeah, no, this is a pretty good opening scene. I thought it was gonna be like a reaction. Like I was a little confused. I was like, oh, okay, we skipped ahead. But that's fine. Like that's a completely valid narrative choice. So, yeah, no, good stuff. Like you said, Gilak's very clever for knowing to leave because, well, obviously, since the kids escaped, they're gonna tell everybody. So it's kind of an obvious thing to do, but also something that often people forget to do. I don't know, like it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, obviously he's going to do this, but you've seen shows where that's not necessarily the case. So yeah, no, good stuff. I like how he left a message on the wall, like for him, like obviously we know he's going to come here and read this. So yeah, ominous opening.
We then switch scene as we move into the next page, and we're with Malik, Molina, Sokka, and Katara. And basically, Molina and Malik are showing Sokka and Katara the new, basically, facilities that are being developed in the south, which is a key part of this kind of southern reconstruction project. We've kind of been waiting for the kind of big kind of why exactly are they there outside of just trying to help the south. And as we get here, it's about the resources of the south that are kind of alluded to here initially, in that Malik basically goes full on into explaining it, but because Katara and Sokka are kind of somewhat distracted by what they've just seen at the end of part 1, they're not fully listening. So like initially we're just presented with the idea that Malik says, I've had the suspicion that there was more to the South Pole than was apparent on the surface, dot dot dot, and then all they hear is like blah blah blah. But we do get the first hints about how Katara and Sokka feel about this, in that Katara says, I can't get the image of Dad kissing Molina out of my head. Sokka is fairly okay with it. I know Dad's a grown-up when he gets to, but, he also isn't the biggest fan of having that image in his head. But he's kind of more accepting of it, in that he says that, look, I'm pretty sure that to us nobody but Mom will ever seem right for Dad, but maybe that's okay because Dad gets to choose who's right for Dad. And Katara's worried that, like, they don't get a say at all. What if they get married? Then she'd be our mother, and she stops short of just quite saying that. But we'll stop it there just with those initial 2 pages, because we are presented with 2 quite interesting things here with regards to the clear mining rig here, the hint of something under the surface, and then the first hints of their feelings about the situation. But Kelly, what are your thoughts on these next 2 pages?
Yeah, I thought the dialogue was pretty good between them. I'm glad that they were just like at a point where they're talking about it now rather than like this in between time of reaction and then like what do you do and then they're talking. So I guess it was actually kind of a good thing to cut to like at the aftermath of it sort of so they can get right to the point about how they feel about it. And I find it kind of funny that like they're kind of like start ignoring them over time, like with the blah blah blah. I was a little confused by that. I thought like at first like he was just like like making fun or something, and then I realized, oh wait, no, they're just spacing out. So that was kind of funny. Like I don't know. Yeah, but their reactions are like pretty much what I expected in the aftermath of it. Again, I don't know how they would react in the moment. Maybe they just walked out. I feel like it would be just funny if they just like, all right, bye. Like they just kind of walked. I feel like with these kind of like how they're talking about afterwards, that would most likely be what happened earlier, but we will never know. Yeah, no, but I mean, yeah, their reactions pretty much are kind of what I expected. Sokka being a little bit more okay with it, the Kantara, but Sokka still kind of being like, ugh, you know what I mean about it at the same time.
Oogies.
Yeah, yeah, the Oogies, right? Ugh, I'm just glad he didn't say that because that was a really stupid part of these comics. But I never liked that word. It was weird, like a weird way to say that. Okay, anyway, yeah, so pretty interesting stuff. And the fact that Katara is so focused like ahead, like she's like, what if this happens and then this happens, you know? And Sokka didn't really get a chance to respond to that because Malik interrupted them. But I thought, I don't know, yeah, it's I don't know. The Sokka is a lot calmer. Well, no, he's pretty much as calm as I thought he would be. I don't know. It's the dialogue I kind of expected, and I'm happy about that. It didn't feel out of character. I felt like it made sense. Yeah, when you know when Sokka's saying, "Look, I'm pretty sure that to us, nobody but mom will ever seem right to dad." Like he's logical. He's like, "Yeah, this really does suck," but you know, but it's dad. It's not our decision. It's dad. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I thought that was interesting. And Katara obviously cares so much for her dad and for everything. It's a little bit caring much for her dad, but also just loving her mom so much. That she's like, you know, trying to protect him. Like, but what if this isn't the right choice? Like, I find it interesting that throughout the book, Katara, like, you know, like she's kind of taking control in her own hands. She's always kind of been like the mother in that sense and taking control. Like, what if this isn't right for you? It's kind of weird, you know? It's like the daughter is like being a mother to the father. Like, so it's kind of, again, the characters are very in character. I like how they do it. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say about it.
Yeah, I like with Katara that she's to some extent like kind of like okay with the idea of like her father like at this point like dating again, but it's more like in the future, like if they get married, mother replacement. That we obviously had the dream at the very start of North and South Part One of her remembering her mother, and Katara's connection to her mother is like such an important thing to her character that's more the focus rather than necessarily like just the fact that their father's kind of like dating again or anything like that. So it's definitely interesting. I like the reactions in that you were kind of questioning like, oh, was Katara going to be like really kind of emotional, angry about this? But she seems more like, oh, it had to be Molina, didn't it? Like just that, like I can't believe it of all people, it's her more so than being angry at the situation happening. Full stop. And yeah, Sokka's logical about it, and that understanding as well, just kind of showing that he is the older sibling in this case, and I like that. But Greg, your thoughts on these two pages?
Yeah, no, I agree with both of you. I really did like the conversation here. It really did seem like, the type of conversation two siblings would have about, someone that their father is dating. And I like, just their sort of back and forth and just, seeing Katara's sort of opinions on it and, seeing Sokka's sort of reactions to it. I think it works very well for the scene. And, just the fact that, this is going on during, what's supposed to be, important conversation for Malik, I think is interesting how they're setting that up. And I don't know, the only other thing I thought was interesting was the fact that he was sort of an exchange student at Ba Sing Se. Sort of makes me wonder if the gang could have sort of ran into him on their travels earlier when they were younger. But no, I think it's definitely interesting, and it's nice how they're sort of setting up the whole sort of conflict that they have here with the siblings and their father dating again. So it's interesting to see how this starts and how it turns out later on.
Mm-hmm. Next, they kind of move out of their own individual conversation and begin to talk to Melina and Malik again, and they're like, okay, explain to us like pretty quickly what's going on here. And Melina, in short, basically just says, we've discovered a huge deposit of oil here under the ice, and we're going to extract it. And Katara's like, oil like what we use for lamps, from the whale walrus blubber. And Malik is like, no, we're talking about oil that's used for engine fuel. And Melina specifically says oil is the key to finally lifting up the South. Katara isn't necessarily happy with the wording on that I didn't realize we needed any lifting up. And Molina says, Katara, that came out wrong. What I meant was, and we start to see Malik kind of present more of like what his actual feelings on the subject are and what he's kind of passionate about. This deposit isn't just big; it's the biggest in all the world. Don't you understand the implications? Our most powerful machines run on oil-based fuel. The more oil we have, the more machines we can have. With this oil, machines can finally be everywhere in every part of our lives. Katara presents the idea, and this is a good thing because, and for the first time, we're getting presented in more or less in ATLA with the idea of this. Katara, it's hard for you to understand because you're a bender. The kind of power you possess just hasn't been available to us non-benders. Until now, machines can make non-benders as powerful as benders. Machines can finally make us equal. Katara says that, I guess I'd never thought of non-benders as not equal. And Sokka says that he gets what Malik is saying. And they make the comparison to the Earth and Fire refinery and the line that had the machines and then the line that had the benders, and they were basically the same efficiency. And we just get a little forklift reference that Sokka liked it when Satoru had his, and they brought it here, establishing that the Earth and Fire refinery have basically given them all of their technology to help with the South. As Molina says that the Earth and Fire refinery representative is coming here right now. Here she comes. So very interesting stuff with Malik here, I think, is the kind of main thing to say. We get the reveal about oil and Malik's kind of true feelings on things. So Greg, what's your take on this? The first hint of like non-bender kind of issues really in the comics.
Yeah, no, I thought this was really interesting to finally see this sort of portrayed here, and it's always sort of like I guess the forward-thinking sort of person who typically, at least how we've seen so far, usually is a non-bender who sort of sees how the sort of status quo is sort of unbalanced somewhat, whereas Katara, which generally I don't know if it's because she's sort of, just because of her abilities or just her personality, she doesn't really see it, as there being any sort of inequality there. But it's definitely interesting how, how this is supposed to change the status and how this is supposed to work later on. So I thought that was really interesting, just sort of how they bring that up here and, getting to see Malik's sort of, I guess his true intentions here. And while right now it's not necessarily as, sort of nefarious as it sort of turns out to be later on in the book, you definitely can see sort of, his views definitely sort of coming out more. So I thought it was interesting just sort of how they set that up and just how we're seeing the whole sort of connection that we'll bring in our sort of next character here. And I really did sort of like the whole sort of forklift reference. It's too bad they didn't really use it too much in this one. Maybe they'll use it in the next book, but I thought that was pretty nice too.
What about you, Kelly? What are your thoughts on the oil deposit reveal and then what Malik is saying here?
Yeah, I didn't actually expect that. I didn't know what to expect, but I didn't know as we found a bunch of oil. I don't know if that was like a plot point in the summaries or anything like that, and I just missed it. But I was like, oh, okay, so that's what this is about. And yeah, like, I mean, obviously back then they didn't understand like energy conversion and stuff like that. So like, I don't know. It's what are you gonna do? I understand their point. It's still positive for them because they're able to make all these machines. Like there are somewhat positives to this, Sokka and Malik were saying, and Malik clearly looks like he doesn't have any like malicious intentions. You know what I mean? Like he's just like he sees the opportunities in this, but it also clouds him from how mean he is being, sort of like to the south, like how like I don't know, like it's kind of strange, and we figured that out later what was going on, but Molina is much more like caring of the South than Malik, but like this is kind of hinting toward that again because he's just seeing the big picture. It's like, see, this is so big that like there's endless possibilities to this. So I think he sees it as like, why waste it on just like here? Like this should go like everywhere. This should be that we're the one that found it. Like, and it's like it's weird because it's like he really doesn't look like he has any malicious. It's not like it's just like he's thinking very kind of like for himself, even though it seems like he's talking about others because he himself is a non-bender. And then that's another thing. I didn't expect us to go into like a bender non-bender thing. I don't know. I hope they don't delve into that, but I really like by the next book I really hope like we really get like what's going on with the message here. Like is it like technology versus not technology? Is it benders versus non-benders? There's like a lot of ideas going on here in the scene. and I hope they get fleshed out. You know what I mean? Like I hope it's not just a mention out of nowhere, like, oh yeah, I'm a non-bender, other people are benders, now we can be equal, and then like that never come up again. Like that seems like a pretty big point, like early Amon stuff. Like this guy would have been an equalist, but he's just some guy from the Northern Water Tribe at this point. But yeah, no, and I like how Katara says, I guess I just never thought as non-benders as not equal, and I thought that was a really good line. But it's also like socially, that's what she thinks, and she's right. Obviously, there's no difference between the two people except for like what they're able to do. So that's why Sokka understands Malik is because he's a non-bender too, and it's like now we can do these things as well. We have our thing, we have our own thing. I mean, yeah, benders can do this too, but they can already do that with their thing. We can do this thing, and it's like again, no malicious intent. That's what kind of makes this comic interesting to me. It's more like, yeah, it's just two different sides of like, it's like really good ideas, and they're really, these things could be great, but it's also masked over by a prejudice toward a group of people. It's like you're doing what you kind of are implying you don't want to do. Like, now non-benders can be equal, but yet you're implying the South is not as equal. It's like, well, what are you talking about here, Malik? It's hypocritical. So no, and then of course forklift. That the forklift reference was really funny. I really liked that part of the rift where he was just like, "What is this?" and then he starts like running around on it. I also wish it came back in some way. I hope it does in the third book as well. I'm like, oh, maybe he can like ride that and something funny can happen. I don't know, but no, it's interesting stuff being brought up here. So.
Yeah, they're dealing with a lot of ideas here, to the point where like it is even now after two parts, it's kind of difficult to fully like just in a sentence kind of explain like what the theme of North and South is really about, and because we're getting like this idea of equality, change is being presented as like an interesting thing now, non-benders versus benders, and technology advancement versus kind of tradition and stuff like that, and it's all kind of blended together here pretty interestingly in that like obviously we know from part one, Molina is a bender. Now does Malik feel anything about that? The fact that his sister is a bender and he's not, is that part of it? Like, are we ever going to get like some backstory that explains like why he specifically is kind of so like I have to be equal to benders on some level? Like, what happened to him to really make him feel this way? And again, it's interesting because he's like he wants to advance technology to get to a point where non-benders can be as equal as benders, but as we kind of later see, he's kind of doing this at the expense of the South, in that the South isn't technologically advanced, and he basically wants to like instantly like advance them, kind of against a lot of their will, for the aim of basically making everyone equal, not taking like the like will of the South really into play at all, which I think is a kind of interesting kind of dynamic to have, in that he obviously feels that like, oh, the Southerners are just savages, and like he's not treating the Southerners as equal to him because he's civilized, and he sees the South as not civilized. So to some degree he's being a bit of a hypocrite here with regards to talking about equality, yet only treating people who he sees as being civilized as kind of worth having an opinion. But we'll get more into this as we kind of go on. So the representative walks over, and it's Toph, of course. We knew this was going to be the case. And her kind of joke that comes back a couple of times here is that, like, she says, "Representative, I'm an executive partner now," as Toph reunites with Katara and Sokka. And she reveals that, sorry for not recognizing you guys at first. These stupid things make me feel all fuzzy, revealing that she is in fact wearing kind of boots or shoes this time around, because obviously she'd probably get frostbite if she just walked around in her bare feet. So they've instantly kind of got past the idea of like, okay, Toph isn't just completely blind out here. Her vision is just kind of, seismic sense is just slightly impaired by wearing shoes and the snow cover. And we get an instant joke of just like, she kind of waves her hand around and smacks Sokka on the face because she feigns that she can't really see, when in fact she's really adapted to it now. It's not really a problem for Toph. So immediately her first page of introduction kind of gets that out of the way. So I suppose really quickly we'll just focus on this page of Toph's introduction here, and then we'll move on. But Greg, what were your thoughts on this kind of initial introduction to Toph and straight away getting the whole vision problem out of the picture?
Yeah, no, I think it was a really good way of sort of, covering their bases on how she can see or how well she can see in the snow and this frozen sort of tundra here. And I guess if you really wanted to get down to it, you can't see behind her that there are some rocks on the ground. So clearly, and the fact that they're actually mining for oil underground means that it isn't just like sort of straight snow to the water, whatever. It's actually, land underneath the snow. So, it's a pretty good way of them sort of covering that, and the whole joke about her sort of being blind and not being able to see correctly. I think, it works well. It's definitely, in character for her. So I think it's really nice how they did this up, and it's nice to see the three of them together again.
Man, and I suppose it links in with the whole oil plot in that, like, if there is a huge oil deposit, it makes sense that there's a lot of earth around the
Mm.
place as well as snow, and that it's not just nothing but ice, as maybe we were perhaps thinking. But Kelly, what are your initial impressions on this Toph reintroduction?
Yeah, I thought it was well done. Pretty early on in the comic too. I thought she was going to show up later and not have a lot of time, but it's like page 14, so I was like, oh, okay. And it makes sense because of the oil thing. Like I was trying to think like, what reason would she have to come here? Like I understand that they're doing like work and stuff to make the South better, but what does it have to do with her job? And it's like, oh, because of this oil thing, this huge thing of oil that the whole world like it's the biggest in the whole world. See, that makes sense. So they thought of a good way to get her here. Convenient timing, of course, but you know, it's a comic. And yeah, I really like the introduction. It's really like they're all friends and it's all happy. And I like how they immediately addressed the yeah, she can't see perfectly. She probably could see buildings and people just fine, but when she sees people, she can't tell who they are. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like she just knows there's a body there. She can't tell like who it is specifically using that ability, which that always seems like the strength of her ability is her knowing exactly who people are based on that. So at least that's kind of my imagination of how far this extends, you know, like how much she can see. Which is why it was so funny when Tom's like, I could barely make out what's around me. Like clearly she can, so she just smacked Sock on the face. Like that's funny. That's the stuff that would happen on the show, man. Like that I really like that part. That was one of the funnier parts of the comic. It's like one panel, but it's like well thought out. Yeah, it's good stuff. How far are we going? I'm sorry, I forgot. Like, are we doing the
Just that
whole?
first page of her.
Just that first page. Okay, I wasn't sure. No, but it was really nicely done. Like if you look at this one page, a lot is happening here, but it's not crowding up the page at the same time. Like just quickly one page, explain the feet problem. Top is here. Funny joke. We're all friends. Like they actually got a lot covered on one page, so I thought that was pretty good that they were able to do that.
Next, we just kind of have a kind of scene transition. We move from one into the next. Melina and Malik are kind of like, we're thanks for coming down, coming all the way down here, Miss Bei Fong. She instantly is just like, no, don't be so formal with me. Just call me Toph. And her thing here is that she says, I've been looking forward to this. I'm a big fan of the future, and from what I hear, that's what you guys are all about. That's just continuing her basic kind of philosophy, ideals from the Rift, that she's always been about, progress, not lingering in the past. That was, her view on the whole conflict with Aang from the Rift, and she's kind of continuing that forward. But as we see, she kind of has a more balanced view on it, as we kind of see a little bit later on. But then we just get the idea that Melina and Malik are hosting a festival in honor of the new partnership with Toph's father's company, and everyone's basically invited as honored guests, and we just kind of move into that scene here with them arriving at the festival, which is held obviously in the big city. And the instant thought I had here as we get some pure pages of art just seeing the festival was that, like, is this meant to be like the establishment of the Glacier Spirits Festival, or what it like uh, is like what it was initially is, and then what Unalaq criticizes it for at a later point. It probably isn't, just because like they don't really seem to talk about it being anywhere near the solstice or anything like that. But just aspects of it seem quite similar in that, as we'll get into in the next couple of pages, the kind of fair games and stuff like that seem to reference those stuff that we see in early Korra book 2. But still a fun thing as we just kind of go into this festival. But Greg, just do you have any quick thoughts on just the idea of this festival here?
Um, Not specifically. I mean, I think it looks I mean, I don't know. It looks very, very, as you said, very reminiscent of what we see later on in Chorus. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe this just was sort of the inspiration to just hold festivals in general in the South. Now that they have more of a community sort of area where they can actually sort of do this thing rather than just, a set of igloos. So, I think it definitely, it speaks towards it. But no, I think this is a good sort of transition into the festival here. And, while they're having this whole conversation, it's interesting to note sort of Katara's sort of like, her sort of worried or sort of concerned faces whenever anyone sort of mentions the festival or the future or anything like that. So, clearly Katara is still in sort of a thought mode about sort of the happenings that are going on, but it looks really cool, everything that's sort of happening so far.
Yeah, like Katara is kind of just going to the festival because it would be rude not to. She doesn't necessarily kind of like really want to go because it's Molina who asked her to go, but she's not going to be like just super rude. But Kelly, any thoughts on the introduction of this festival here?
I thought it was a good transition. Like I thought they were just gonna be I thought they were just gonna kind of be standing around and talking for like another couple pages, which they are for the next page, like introductions or whatever. But then they're like, let's go to this festival thing, and then they just cut to this festival, and I was like, oh, okay. Like I didn't expect that kind of like transition. But just before the festival, I thought it was kind of funny when Melina, she's still so happy and so go lucky. She's like, well, they'll have music and games and all the food you want, and Sokka's like, okay, I'm liking this lady more and more, and that's just because she keeps feeding you. And he's like, so? Like, that's it. I just like that he's like, so? Like, that's a reason. That's a valid reason. So, I don't know. I like that panel. I thought that was fun. Sokka very easily accepts people over time pretty fast. Like, I don't know. I just could tell that about his character. Like, if a person does one thing that he likes, then like he's just like, all right, I'm in, I trust you. So I kind of see that more here. The actual festival itself, I'm a little confused because is it supposed to be the idea that this is the origin of the winter festival? Like this is supposed to be like one of the first winter festivals, if not the first one? Because it's like I forgot what the winter festival was supposed to be about in Korra. Was it just about the spirits, or was it about the North and South uniting with each other?
Um, it's a weird one in that like it's a festival and they call it the Glacier Spirits Festival, and like Unalaq says like it's meant to be a spiritual festival, like leading up to the solstice, but because the South hadn't developed spiritually at that time, it wasn't about that, and it was more about games and stuff like that. So I'm not really sure if it's just kind of establishing that like this is how the South now throws festivals or anything like that. It's probably not meant to be the same one from Korra, but just that they throw parties in the same way or something like that.
That's true. Like they have a certain style to festivals, but there are different reasons behind it. Yeah, because it's a different reason. So, all right, I'll just take that. Yeah. So, unless we get some kind of confirmation in third book or something, I don't know. Anyway, how far are we going into the festival? I'm sorry. I don't know, like what page we're stopping at.
Yeah, we were just ending at the page that has no dialogue with the big
Oh.
part of the festival.
Oh, well, that's a nice shot. Yeah, I really like it. The lighting is really good. Nice yellows and blues. They contrast each other pretty well. I'm pretty sure they're. Oh, yeah, is yellow and blue? No, it's yellow and purple. Never mind. I was thinking of the color wheel. Either way, usually yellow and blue wouldn't look, I guess, that great together. But I like how it kind of mixes and becomes these greens on top of these. I don't know. It's just it's a pretty festival. It's well animated. I like it.
So yeah, in the festival we basically get the idea that kind of Sokka and Toph kind of go off together. Katara's kind of left on her own, and Sokka and Toph immediately see a game that they like. And they see the poundy poundy game, which is obviously you swing the hammer to make the thing go as high as possible. And Toph is instantly like, "That's my favorite game. We're going over to that." And she instantly says, "Time to get paid, Sokka." And he's just like, "I don't think that's how it works here. Like, it's not about money like it was in the Runaway, where they actually like bet and like scammed people using the fact that Toph was blind, but then that she was actually like super skilled." So I really like that reference to the Runaway, that like Toph just sees a game and instantly thinks like payday. So that's fun. But then we get into the Katara, what she's up to. Paku walks over, and we get a follow-up to the very mysterious line of dialogue from part one, where he told her that like you'd find it very interesting what's going on in the waterbending school down here. So he introduces her to two of his students, Siku and Sura, and he basically introduces Katara as, "Katara here is an incredibly accomplished waterbender, possibly the finest in all the world. She's acting really humble, no need to brag about me." And he instantly like kind of shuts it down by saying, it's no surprise really she did have the world's finest waterbending master. As she's like, oh, you are the same as you were before. And she's being really nice to the kids. How are your lessons going? And they say bad, real bad, because we're not waterbenders, and run off. Paku kind of fills her in that they've been like that the entire time, and that Gran Gran and him found them in a tiny village east of here. They live about as far inland as a tribe can get, well out of sight from the shore. And then we see in the background that they are actually benders, but and they're very talented for their age. And Paku just notes it's like they don't want to share their waterbending with anyone but themselves, as we see that Toph in the background is putting on her usual blind girl show to kind of scam people. This is really interesting, but it's given a very little amount of time in that I feel Katara should have had a bigger reaction to the reveal that other southern waterbenders and the potential like hints that like there's actually like a separate like village apart from the main one that like Katara and Sokka are from, that basically maybe is kind of more well developed because they weren't close to the shore when the initial attack on the south came or something like that. That there are waterbenders out there, and then I'm not entirely sure what they're going for, just with their kind of the attitudes of these kids, and that like, okay, they kind of establish that they're like isolated from maybe everyone else. They live in a smaller village, and they like their waterbending, but they like to keep it to themselves. It's just they kind of leave it at that, and I'm not really sure what they're going for necessarily. I'm interested, but it's just like it's given so little amount of time. I'm not really sure what way I'm meant to take it. But Kelly, what are your thoughts on this Paku kind of reveal here?
Yeah, I saw this in your review and I was interested to see what part you were talking about, and this is obviously the part you're talking about. It is kind of interesting. The one thing that I guess I'll always be slightly confused about that I wish they kind of explained more was the idea that the South Pole harbors multiple villages and that we only focused on Katara and Sokka's village, which seemed to be like the main one, but there were also smaller ones, which how could there be smaller ones? But there were smaller ones in other places in the South Pole, and it's like, oh, okay. And assumingly they had contact with them and knew about them to just be so calm about their existence, like later on, like once they came back, or like other parts of the comic series as well. And the reason why I don't think Katara is probably reacting to so much to new waterbenders in the South is probably because the other villages were also visited by the Northern Water Tribe and helped with, and these are little girls, like, well, I guess they would have been alive at the same point Katara was, right? Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously they're both alive right now. I guess I mean more in the sense of would they be born when she found it? Actually, yeah, I guess I don't know. It's a weird thing. So that I guess that's like the one thing about the Avatar universe that always confused me that they introduced and then they never really explained. It's like, wait, there was more than just the Southern Water Tribe. There were other tribes in the South Pole, and they didn't have waterbenders, but they did. Oh, I don't know. Anyway, as for the plot itself, I like how it's written here. The idea of these two girls being really shy and not sharing their abilities is kind of interesting. I don't quite 100% understand where they're going with this either, but I do think there is huge significance to what Paku says in the last panel, and the one where Toph is, pretending to hit the hammer. I really think that is going to have a connection. Like Katara learning about this is going to have a connection to her understanding something between like Malik and Molina or what's going on. Because I really think the line, it's like they don't want to share their waterbending with anyone but themselves. I feel like that has to do with what's going on in this book. Like it felt like that line, I can't tell you, I can't pinpoint exactly what it's hitting home. Like, is it hitting home that Malik and Molina only wanted the oil, or at least Malik only wanted the oil for themselves, but they know how great it could be, like the girls waterbending, like pretending like they don't. Is that hinting at that, or is there a bigger message here? Like you should share your abilities with others, including improvement of the South Pole, like just being sharing your abilities with others. I'm kind of getting that vibe out of it. I don't know exactly what they're going for either. But I don't like dislike it or anything, unless they really do nothing in the third book to follow this up. Then you'd be like, well, what was the point of that? Then I'm sure they will, though. It feels like they are. Like, what's the point of bringing this up and not bringing it back again, even if it's just for a short amount of time? So I like it overall. I find it interesting that these little girls would not want to share their waterbending abilities. That's kind of interesting. I don't think we've really seen that before outside of Haru in the Earthbending village, that they couldn't share the abilities because then he'd be taken away. So, and these girls are just willingly too shy to have their waterbending be around other people. So I don't know. I find it interesting, I guess.
Yeah, like I think the Haru thing is probably actually a pretty good comparison here in that uh, when Katara talks to them, they say they're not waterbenders and run off. Like they don't want to tell a lot of people that they are waterbenders, which to me is either hinting something along the lines of that Gilak has no waterbenders on his crew, in that maybe he was looking for other waterbenders and like these two girls' parents hid them from them and told like if any people came around, don't tell them that you're waterbenders. And Paku has like convinced the parents enough that like no, we'll train them in waterbending so they can protect themselves, but they still tend to like stick to not telling anyone. That or one of them looks at least old enough to potentially have been a bender, um, at a point maybe I don't know. The ages is a kind of weird thing, and that like one of them could potentially have been old enough that maybe they showed some signs of bending in or around the time of the Fire Nation attacks or something like that. I'm not fully sure. It's a very confusing thing because there's only like 2 pages of it here. But Greg, what are your thoughts on where they're going with this plot?
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting, and you guys definitely have it, a couple different ways of where it might go. I mean, I don't know, it's interesting just that we sort of, once we finally, sort of figured out how that there were sort of benders in the South, it seems like, I don't know, it seems like one of those, not like a total sort of cop out, but it just seems like one of those sort of situations that always sort of seems to work somehow, just that there happens to be some random sort of remote group of, people that have sort of abilities that no one else really knew that they sort of existed. So I don't know. It's interesting that that's sort of the way that they chose to do it. I'm not sure, how else they sort of would have done it, but it definitely seems like these girls have definitely sort of have been sort of trained or just sort of conditioned not to sort of want to share their abilities with anyone, which I would assume just because of, everything that sort of has happened with the South and being a bender and being sort of taken away. So it doesn't sort of surprise me too much that they sort of would be sort of conditioned at a young age to sort of not want to show that they're really a bender at all. So, I mean, it still is sort of kind of sad to see that, but is sort of, how it is. So it'll be interesting to see if, between the next sort of comic, if, maybe Katara or someone else can sort of break them sort of out of that mindset if they choose to sort of continue on with that thread. I'm not really sure. It doesn't really seem like they're focusing too much time on it to really sort of make it worth it to sort of expand upon it. But, I sort of hope that they do, just because it seems like something that could be really cool if they actually chose to explore it. But no, I think overall, it's definitely sort of interesting, and I'm curious to see how they take it.
Hmm. Yeah, like because I think whatever the root of this is, it kind of has to be something that's happened within the last 2 years, because Paku basically left to come down to the south effectively in or around 2 years ago at this point in the timeline, whatever way that ends up working out. So he's clearly, him and Gran Gran found these two, started their training, noticed their potential, and maybe something happened just before that or in the 2 years that has kind of made them feel this way. I don't know. It's definitely an interesting one to keep an eye on. But we'll move on. So outside the kind of city gates, we see that Hakoda and his troops are kind of keeping watch, and that they're aware that Gilak is planning something, so they're kind of waiting for us, as we see that Gilak is in fact watching them from afar, and he knows that Hakoda's waiting for him. And we see that he has his troops prepared far away as well, and he also has a kind of mechanical drill in the background as well, which I think is a pretty interesting thing. I suppose we can use now to kind of talk about it, in that Gilak and his kind of troops represent kind of the old ways of the South, of like very much their traditional, they have to keep their old ways, warrior ways. And the South is very not technologically advanced, so where does he get all the like stuff from? And that like the two of the characters we see in the background here were the two people who robbed the briefcase in the first part using like snowmobiles. Where did they get those from? Where did they get the drill from? And they have other little bits and pieces of technology, like the proper binoculars here, which to me is just like Gilak kind of comes across as like the guy who wouldn't like technology, yet he uses it. So he's clearly been given it by someone, or else they've stolen it. It's definitely interesting, but we see them talking. He prepares for battle, and they're basically going to use the drill to kind of take Hakoda by surprise by like drilling underneath them by going underground. So I suppose, Greg, what are your take on this? Just the kind of setup of Gilak's plot, and I suppose the technology point that I made as well.
Yeah, no, I think the technology point you made is definitely really interesting. I mean, the whole idea with the snowmobiles, I definitely could see that as just, they just stole that. But, having a drill of that sort of magnitude makes you really think that they have, either somebody who's sort of funding this sort of whole sort of operation against them, or, something else is sort of going on here. But it's definitely a nice sort of setup to see, the two sort of opposing sort of forces, going against each other here. We can see, his second in command Thawd with the briefcase here, which we, at this point don't know yet what it's going to be used for, but we can assume it has something to do with what's going to happen later on. So no, I think it's definitely sort of a interesting sort of setup they have here, and just sort of, it makes you just sort of really sort of curious sort of what's going to happen and how it's all going to sort of play out.
And Kelly, do you have any thoughts on this kind of setup with Gilak here, and potentially what the technology is about with him?
Yeah. Like with him being kind of against the technology, but also using the technology for his advantage kind of thing. I mean, yeah, it's a little funny. Like he's like, we got to keep it back to what we had already, but like also he has a giant drill. But I think he's just using what he has to his advantage kind of thing. Like, I don't like this, but if it helps us, then fine, let's use it. Plus, I think they have enough support on their side to get that kind of drill. Like, I'm sure that they raided and stole a drill from the people, the refinery people. That really them having the drill isn't really surprising to me. It's more of like them using the drill. It's like, well, aren't they like against this stuff? But whatever. And the setup's good. The idea of like he knew that they would be looking out for them, so it's like, yeah, well, yeah, because like he's predictable, like he said. So let's go underground. Let's screw them underground. So that was kind of an interesting, literally, because it's a drill. But yeah, so. I don't know, it's a good plan. Gilak seems to have good plans, but he's just an extremist and not thinking a lot about other things. But then again, I would be kind of pissed too if I read it was in that briefcase. So I don't know. It's good stuff, I guess.
So yeah, we move on to the next scene, a pretty important one of the better ones in the book. And yeah, Hakoda gets a visitor out, obviously keeping watch, and it's Katara. And we basically get that Hakoda is not going to the festival because he's keeping a watch over the entrance into the city until the festival's over. He's very worried about the fact that just in the past 2 days, Molina was attacked, Sokka and Katara were nearly kidnapped, Secret Army is threatening the safety of everyone, and that they need to be vigilant. And we immediately transition into the kind of scene we were waiting for, that Hakoda notices that Katara's acting a bit odd around him, and kind of he addresses it. He says, Katara, you're worried about something, to tell me. And she says, it's nothing. And he immediately says, it's Molina. Well, yeah. And Katara says, why didn't you tell us about her? And he says, I should have, and I'm sorry about that, but I wasn't sure if you and Sokka were ready. And then Katara says, but are you sure you're ready? Can I be honest? I don't get why you choose her. And Hakoda just says, I know Molina can come across as gruff. Katara interrupts and says, it's not just that, Dad. I get gruff. I'm friends with Toph. Molina doesn't really understand us. You mean you and Sokka? No, I mean us, the big us, the Southern Water Tribe. And honestly, I don't trust her. What if she's up to something I don't know, nefarious? And Hakoda just reassures her here and says, Katara, I assure you, Molina is a lot of things, but nefarious isn't one of them. Even if you don't trust her, you have to trust me, okay? Molina has a lot to learn about our way of life, but deep down inside, she has a good heart. I wouldn't have fallen in love with her otherwise. And Katara says, but maybe that's the problem, Dad. No offense, but what if you were being blinded by your feelings? And Hakoda says, you're old enough now that we can talk about these things. You know what it's like to be in love, right? and she pauses and says yes. So you know that kind of love, the kind that's real, that sacrifices, that kind of love doesn't blind you. It actually helps you see. And we'll cut it off there mid-page before the arrival of a certain character we all know, just to cover the Hakoda Katara scene that we get here, because it's definitely, I think, one of the best written ones in the whole book. But Kelly, what were your thoughts on this important scene?
Yeah, this was really well done. I didn't know what to expect exactly, and I thought it was just really interesting. And that Katara was able to feel like it was okay for her to be honest here because he said she could, obviously. And they just, I don't know, it was just a really nice discussion. I don't even really know where to begin with it. Just the fact that, Katara is too afraid to talk to her dad about it, but her dad, like, yeah, I know. Like, I know what it is. Okay, yeah, it's like, you're gonna have to explain more, though. Yeah, I don't know. And he clearly does seem really regretful. Like, yeah, I should have told you guys. That was my bad. I was just really concerned you guys would be upset, which is pretty much what we all expected. You know what I mean? Like, he just didn't want to hurt them or whatever. And I don't know. I like how Katara kind of has two sentences here. Like, at first she's like, "Are you sure you're ready?" And then she's like, "Okay, wait, no, I'm diving into deep water." So she's like, "Can I be honest?" Like, I kind of expect her to say it like that. Like she doesn't want to hurt his feelings, but she's like, I have to be honest with how I feel. So it's a very like raw conversation. I didn't I mean, I shouldn't say I didn't expect it, but I guess it like kind of went like more like in detail than I thought it would go. I didn't think they would go right into the talk like super fast and this much all at once, like going from like, I don't really know how I feel about her to, well, I think she's various. Like I was like, oh, okay, we're really getting to everything right now. I thought this would kind of be not drawn out, but like maybe two scenes would go to this, but clearly it seems like it's this is the main one. And yeah, I kind of like him. He's like, I know Molina can come across as gruff. He's like, that's not it, Dad. I get gruff. I'm friends with Toph. I was like, oh, okay, well that's kind of funny. And Katara's concerns are legitimate. Like she's like, but she doesn't understand us. She's constantly like questioning our tribe and that we're not good enough. She doesn't say that, but like that's the gist of what she's saying here. And I don't know, like I was actually almost afraid to go to the next page because I kind of felt bad for Hakoda here because clearly we know Molina isn't really that nefarious. We kind of know this, even though you understand Katara's concerns. You know what I mean? You understand like her concerns based on Malika actually kind of being a little bit more nefarious. But I was so concerned, but then he's just like still talking through the conversation normally, and I'm like, oh, this is so good, this is so pure. You know what I mean? Like he just, oh, I love this. Even if you don't trust her, you have to trust me, okay? I was like, oh god. Like I don't know, this is just a really good conversation. I really don't know what else to say about it. And then her even backlashing to that. I think she backlashed because he actually used the L word, which I did not expect him to use, and I thought she was gonna go like, what? And then she sort of did, but for the wrong reasons. Like she was like, okay, but you don't think you're blinded by that? Which is that? Like, because like he said he loved her, so it's like, I don't know. I thought that was a really interesting part, and then this transition to who comes next with what Hakoda is saying is really interesting. I really like that. But at the same time, it's one of those things where I get what he's saying, but also like how does he technically I'm not with Katara, but I sort of understand what Katara is saying here in the sense of how do you know it's the right kind? I guess maybe because he's experienced it once before with Kaya, so I guess like that's how he knows. Plus he's an adult, so I guess that makes sense. But it's one of those things where I don't know. It was a really nice saying. Like, it's the right kind of love, the kind that's real, where you aren't blinded by it, actually helps you see. Like, that's really sweet. That's a really, I don't know. This was a really sweet conversation that I thought could have went very south very fast. It's like, this could go really bad, and then it didn't. So I was like, yay. Good stuff.
Yeah, like, it was a much needed conversation, and it served a lot of roles, and like, I suppose the main one being that I think just for everyone reading this, you just, in no way are you suspecting Molina as like a villain after this conversation, because of just everything that we've seen already in like this book and what they're presenting Malik as, and especially just the way he kind of talks about it, that like they basically establish in this kind of conversation that at the end of part one, it's not like that is like potentially like the first kiss they've ever had, or like that is the very start of their relationship. Like this is something that's kind of been blossoming for a while since Katara and Sokka have been away from the tribe. It's not just a really sudden thing, that this is happened over time, and he knows her, and that like I think when he talks about the idea that like this love helps you see, is that like as we later find out that basically Hakoda's influence on Molina has helped change her mind, helped her to see the South more clearly, and I suppose at some point we're going to get potentially Molina's influence on Hakoda, not in a nefarious way, but like what she has helped him with, and um, I was uh, I was kind of surprised, but also like that's really interesting, just that he is aware of kind of how close Katara's relationship with Aang is, even though technically he wouldn't have like really seen the two of them like together all that much, but he is very clear of that and kind of knows about their relationship, of course. So I just think it's interesting that he kind of turned it around on her in that way to kind of help her relate to what was happening here. I just think it's definitely one of the better written things we've had in like the entire comics up to now. But Greg, what's your thoughts on this important scene?
Yeah, no, I think it's really good that, they have that point that they can sort of compare it back and forth with each other, because I think that's really sort of, what sort of helps, Katara sort of understand her dad's point of view, whereas, Sokka is generally, more understanding, but, for Katara with her, just with her relationship that she's had with her mother and just sort of how important that is to her herself and just her family in general and just, the Southern Water Tribe in general, I think is really important that this conversation sort of happens so that she could, have a better sort of understanding of her dad's sort of point of view in general and just sort of, understand that, this isn't, super sudden as it may sort of seem to her and her brother, that, it sort of has been sort of happening over time. And, it seems, from what we get from this conversation, Hakoda definitely has sort of thought about his sort of relationship and sort of how it will sort of affect his children and sort of, how it might sort of just change things in general, either for the better or for the worse. So, he's definitely sort of, has a good sort of, idea of everything that sort of has been sort of happening in his relationship and sort of with Katara as well, which I think is really cool just to see them sort of have this nice sort of sit down conversation before, it introduces us to our next sort of character arrival here. I think it's definitely a nice sort of calmer moment in this comic.
Mm. And I don't know, is it kind of more kind of smaller point, but I kind of like that this conversation really didn't touch or refer to Kaya basically at all. That we were speculating the whole time, like, is that the root of potentially why Katara would be potentially against this whole thing? But I just find it interesting that ultimately it comes down to just the type of person Melina is and what Katara sees of her right now, and her just maybe kind of actually kind of being concerned for her father, and that like, are you sure you're ready to move on? That like she's actually deep down okay with that idea, that it's not so much about the whole is Kaya going to be replaced. Maybe if in part three like they get engaged or something like that, that might come up a little bit more or something like that. But that it fundamentally isn't that. It's this really emotional thing of like Katara not being able to accept anyone else being with her father or anything like that. So I kind of like that they didn't put such a massive like wall in front of this scene, and that they just allowed it to kind of happen like this. But yes. Anyway, where we ended mid-page was that someone was arriving. So Appa and Aang and Momo all arrive, and instantly you kind of have the whole idea of like we transition from love, real love helps you see. She sees the person she's in love with arrive basically, and she's instantly like shoots over to him, hug. They both say each other's name, and the scene that we get here is pretty interesting. In that like Katara says, "I missed you so much, sweetie." Hank says, "Can I kiss you, sweetie?" Maybe not in front of my dad. Okay. Quick catching up on basically what happened in Smoke and Shadow, because obviously Katara left midway through. As far as Katara was aware, it was just about like, were you able to get the spirits to settle down? He reveals it was actually Azula, and he just says that, but things turned out okay. I'm just glad the Kyoshi Warriors are there to help out. Aang and Hakoda kind of meet up again. Avatar Aang, good to see you, Chief Hakoda. And Katara reveals it's actually Head Chieftain Hakoda now, and he's like, congratulations, Head Chieftain Hakoda, sir. And he just says, please just call me Hakoda, Aang, but thank you. And then we get the idea like, what's going on here? How come you guys are out here? And Hakoda just says, just playing it safe. Don't worry, it's nothing my officers can't handle. You two just go enjoy the festival. Thanks, Dad. And we get Katara asking Aang the question, my dad's always been kind to you, hasn't he? And Aang just says, "Yeah, of course. Why do you ask?" And as she looks back at her father, who's kind of walked away to talk to someone, she says, "I've just been thinking I ought to do the same for him." Clearly, basically saying that like he has been nothing but supportive of my relationship with Aang. I should at the very least try to be supportive of his relationship, given that he really cares about Melina, and I kind of haven't given her a chance. Another, I think, really well done scene, one transitioning to the other. It's definitely my favorite, like overall, like 5 or 6 page section of the comic. I think it's really well done. I wish they'd caught Aang up a little bit more on the plot that was going on, because I feel like he still isn't like fully involved in the story, in that he only really fights after this point. This is like his only like notable character scene. But Greg, what were your thoughts on the arrival of Aang here?
Yeah, and I thought this was a really sort of cute scene. How they have, it's just a really good transition just from the conversation that they had before into Aang's sort of arrival. And I thought it was cute how they didn't kiss because their dad was there. So I thought that was really sort of nice how they set that up. But no, I think it's really nice sort of just seeing, our two sort of, our couple that we always know about sort of come back together, and just to see them together and see them interact, right before everything that's sort of happened here. And just, how, this really gives, Katara a reason to sort of change your perspective. And I thought this was really cool. I really sort of was, this gave me, sort of a lot of sort of hope for sort of what would come as far as, the relationship with Molina. And when we see what happens on the next couple of pages, it really does look like things could actually sort of work out for the better until, of course, things sort of, play out later on. So no, I thought this was a really good sort of transition scene, and just really good of seeing, Katara and Aang back together again.
And Kelly, what were your thoughts on this reunion scene here?
Yeah, I thought this was really sweet. I literally went like, "Ah," when he came
Mm.
on the bison, like in that in between. It was like, "Oh, that's a good transition." It was really cute. I'm not gonna lie. When I first read the "I missed you so much, can I kiss you?" Maybe not in front of my dad. I was like, I don't know. You can get a little bit of playful payback for that right there, like in the sense that like they had to walk in on that and they could do that. I was obviously I'm kidding, but that's what I thought of at the time.
Mm.
I was like,
Yeah.
maybe later. Yeah, so I like how like Aang explains like what happened there, but no one really explained to him what's happening here. I agree with you, Morgan. It's like, well, does he even really know what's going on? I'm sure they had a conversation off book. Like, you know what I mean? They're kind of telling you, well, obviously he's gonna know what's going on. We're gonna tell him what's going on, kind of thing. So, still, you would have wanted like a line or something instead of just the Hakoda and Aang being nice to each other kind of thing. But it was really nice to see them talk to each other, and that panel where oh yeah, just playing it safe, don't worry, it's nothing. It's like, well, no, Aang should probably know what's going on. Like that. I thought that was kind of weird, like when you tell him like exactly what the situation is as the he's the avatar. But whatever, I think he just wanted them, you can see here he just wants them to have fun, like go enjoy the festival, have your time, be in love. And it was just really sweet, and it really is nice when Katara's like, I've just been thinking I ought to do the same for him. And I don't even think that's just talking about, I don't think that's just talking about Melina. I mean, it is a little bit, but Katara's had her emotions in the past with the awakening, in 3-1, and how she really does kind of take out a lot of anger on him sometimes based on her emotions. And I think she's just like, all right, I gotta chill with that. She's
Mm.
my dad. I gotta treat it better. And that's kind of what I got out of it. You know what I mean? Like, he's just really been nothing but kind and understanding of me, even though I didn't agree with him with Melina. So I don't know. I thought that was really sweet. I thought that was really well done. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, like I think just across these two scenes, like it just highlights that like Hakoda is actually like this book has really presented him. We've already kind of known from the show, but he was like in it just a little enough that we maybe didn't get everything about him as a character. But it just really emphasizes that like he's a super understanding character. Like he rarely we ever see him get like all that angry. He's always kind of open to giving people a chance or like talking to them about stuff. It works really well that they've kind of decided to kind of properly like characterize him, like kind of similar to the way like May was kind of really well dealt with in the previous series, and like Hakoda feels like he's kind of getting the same treatment here. But we transition back into the festival. Aang and Katara are now kind of have met up with Sokka and Toph. Uh, Sokka's trying to win his first prize as Toph is just like covered in like kind of soft toys that she's won from all of the places. And Katara spots Molina in the crowd and just walks straight over to her and says, "Hey, listen, I just wanted to say thank you for inviting my brother and me to this festival. He's having a lot of fun. Actually, we're both having a lot of fun." Melina is kind of like, "Oh, you like." She kind of notices a little bit that like Katara is kind of being more open with her. "Don't mention it, Katara. Having you here is enough. You know me, Malik and I think the world of you two." And then Melina spots Aang and is like, "Wait, is that the Avatar?" And then Katara's like, "Sure, I'll be happy to introduce you if you'd like." And she basically says, "I'd love that." And Malik just takes Melina aside and says, "It's time for our big announcement." And she says, "Okay, I'll introduce you to Aang once the announcement's over." As we just get a little bit of basically Sokka wins his first prize. He's about to collect it, and we get a close-up look at the prizes that Toph has, and we see that she has actual Momo is basically riding on Toph, and there is a lemur, kind of a winged lemur teddy that he's holding. There's a purple pentapus teddy, a snow leopard caribou teddy, which was an animal just introduced in North and South Part 1, penguin otter, badger mole. I have no idea what the green fish thing is meant to be. I was initially thinking, is that meant to be like the two-headed fish from the Painted Lady that they got? But I'm not entirely sure. That reference, I don't know if it's meant to be a reference or if it's just meant to be a normal fish. But anyway, pretty cool stuff here. But the main thing here is just Katara straight away kind of trying to be nicer to Melina. But Kelly, what were your thoughts on these couple of pages?
Yeah, I thought this was really nice. I like how Katara just immediately was like, "Let me go talk to her." I've never had a real like just nice conversation with Melina, and this is a good way to start. Maybe seeing Melina, who my dad sees her as, and she's just so pleasant. You know what I mean? I mean, I liked Melina in the first book, but I was also a little bit kind of put off by like her thoughts on the Southern Water Tribe in general. But even though she had this look of like I still like care about this place and everything. It's just she kind of said these ignorant things without like meaning to be ignorant. So I find it fascinating that Melina is genuinely a good person who is willing to change, but genuinely has these stigmas, probably because of her brother, honestly, and because of her home. So I don't know. I like Melina a lot more. Just she's just a very energetic person, very happy person, So and Hakoda could use some happiness in his life, considering everything. So it's a really sweet scene. And just that she's so excited to see the Avatar. That's cool. I don't know if she knows that Katara is. She probably does. Yeah, she probably does. Oh, duh, of course she does, because she knows Hakoda. She's with Hakoda. So yeah, they've definitely probably talked about it. So yeah, she knows that. And of course it is interesting that, Malik pulls her aside. Obviously it's for an official thing. Like, I'm sorry I have to pull her aside, but I have to do this. But, it's kind of also metaphorical with whole, like, what Malik has kind of been doing with Melina this whole time or whatever. And yeah, it's funny, the amount of, I wasn't even really paying attention the first time, but there are references here. I didn't notice Momo holding mini Momo. I thought that was just like a plush and a plush. I didn't pay attention enough to see that. That's really cute. Like, look at that. Like, at first he looks at it in the panel above, and then he starts squishing it. Like, he starts hugging it. I'm like, that's adorable. I think that's just meant to be a fish, honestly. I think that's just meant to be a fish. It could have been something more interesting, I guess, but you got the badger mole, you got the penopus, the penguin, the lion. It's good references, and there are actually even better references on the next page, but I guess we'll talk about that later next. So yeah, good scene.
And Greg, your thoughts on this Katara trying with Melina scene?
Yeah, no, I thought this was really nice. I mean, this was, continuing what sort of happened before. This was, one of the parts that I really liked. It really made me think that, their relationship could really be mended and, something really could sort of happen. The fact that she was just so excited to meet this sort of avatar, just sort of highlights, her, general sort of positivity that she has, and just, it makes you actually sort of like her character a bit more. So I thought, they did a good job of that in these kind of scenes here, despite sort of what happens later on. So it's just sort of unfortunate how things sort of turn out later on. But no, I think this was a definitely sort of cool scene. It's nice to see, sort of the gang here just sort of having fun, sort of as, kids rather than, people sort of trying to save the world. So it's nice to see them, do something different for a change.
Next pages, Melina gives her speech to everyone. Like, the reason basically they're there to talk about the Earth and Fire Refinery, joining of them. And she says, "My name is Melina. As many of you already know, my brother Malik and I were brought here as part of the Southern Reconstruction Project. Together with you, we are going to usher the South Pole into a brand new era. We get a side cutaway to Sokka picking his prize, and he points like, "Could I have the giant polar bear dog, please?" And the owner basically says, "Sorry, you got to win 7 more times to get that." And he gives him the smallest prize, which I assume thematically what they're going for here is that this is a snow rat that Sokka has been given, and they're meant to like, it's meant to be this interesting reference of that. This is the big speech talking about the future of the South, and we have Thodd's story in our head from part one, plus we see him a little bit later on, and the idea that a southerner is forgiving a snow rat, and the northerners are potentially treating the South like snow rats, and that's pretty fun. The only other notable reference that I have is just that we get the Koizilla monster from the book one water finale of ATLA. They've actually made a plush out of that, so that's just to me pretty interesting that they made a plush of this big crazy attack thing that happened up in the north, and they kind of have it here. And of course, the polar bear dog is a Korra reference. But the speech continues. We'll help you make the most of your natural resources so you can finally establish a presence for yourselves on the world stage. And everyone's clapping, but a couple of people are in the audience are like, "Is that a good thing? Yeah?" And they're kind of questioning what's going on. Toph begins to sense like something. She can't quite figure out what exactly it is. She can feel something underground coming towards them. And she basically says, "I'd know exactly what it was if it weren't for the shoes." Molina continues her speech. "Tonight we're thrilled to announce a partner in this venture, Earth and Fire Industries, Representative Toph Beifong," and then we get the reference to that. I think she prefers executive partner. "Executive partner Toph Beifong, where are you? Would you like to come up and say a few words?" She says a few words, but it's "everyone get out of here" as the drill erupts out of the ground, and Gilak, Thodd, and everyone arrives in the middle of the city. So pretty big scene. We're setting up towards the really, really important scene right now. But Greg, what are your thoughts on the opening sections of this speech and a potentially very interesting use of soft toys as a thematic device?
Yeah, no, I thought that was interesting how his story sort of, actually seems like it's represented here, and, how he sort of, thought later on actually, speaks a bit more about the story here. But overall, I thought this was a good sort of setup, just, sort of getting the idea of sort of what they're here to do, and, getting to see, the other Southerners' sort of reactions, and seeing how, some of them are for us, some of them don't necessarily sort of understand or sort of get the whole idea of having sort of a world presence, which is, sort of understandable considering, how sort of isolated they have been for so long here. Is, it's not something that, you necessarily would sort of think of automatically. So it's nice to see that, even though they're generally seeming accepting of this, at least before what happens later on, there definitely is sort of some questions about this. But no, I think it's definitely sort of interesting just sort of how this sets up, and how, Toph's sort of muffled sort of abilities here, is something that, generally sort of would have helped their situation better off later on. But no, I think it's definitely a good sort of speech here. Definitely, it seems, pretty positive. I think, Molina does a good job of sort of, presenting it, almost in sort of the perfect light you can here. I really like the frame of her sort of presenting it to everyone right before the drill comes out. It's definitely sort of a nice sort of shot they have here before everything sort of comes to pass.
Yeah, like the speech here is actually really good in that like she's just presenting the idea that like most of you don't know, but you have really good natural resources here. Given that like you're struggling in the aftermath of the war, we are going to help you to use those natural resources to kind of like connect back in with the rest of the world, and kind of people will want oil with everything that's advancing, and you can be a huge player if we use that correctly. And she's saying the right things here, even though I think most people from the South live fairly simply, and so are just like, what does that mean? What does our natural resources kind of like mean to us? We're not used to that. When in fact they're maybe not thinking about the fact that like they go out hunting, like if they're taking oil out of the ground, is that going to affect the wildlife that they potentially hunt to get their food and stuff like that? It will have an impact on their way of life, even though they maybe don't fully understand it right now. But Kelly, what's your thoughts on this kind of section of the speech that we get before Gilak arrives?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Clearly they're very excited and they think that they're reaching everybody and that this is a big thing, but at the same time they're kind of speaking in a way that everyone's kind of like I like that little panel where people are clapping, but they're like, is that a good thing? Like, I mean, we've been doing good so far. I don't know what that means, but so it's kind of funny. Like they I don't know, like it's interesting to see them like not be kind of closer to them, you know? They make it like a grand speech. I think what I get out of this is, and another way that they kind of approached Malik and Melina approached helping the South in the wrong way is the fact that they're doing this like a big speech thing. Like I don't know, like I like it, you'd almost want to like talk to the people and explain to them, or do it through Hakoda. You know what I mean? But then again, Hakoda is defending the village right now from Gilak, so that makes sense. Anyway, that's kind of what I got of like them. Like it kind of looks like they're talking down on them, even if they don't want to. Melina, at least, you know, at least I don't think Melina is trying to talk down to anybody, but she put herself in a position where it looks like she is. And I definitely saw that reference too with Sokka getting the little toy out of it. What I did not notice was the fact that it's a snow rat, and I didn't think about the snow rat. That was a good catch because I didn't know that. I definitely got the vibe that it's like the idea that the North is giving the South the short end of the stick. You know what I mean? Like oh man, I only get this. You know what I mean? Like as soon as that happened, I'm like, okay, I can kind of get what's going on here. They're not really going to help the South as much as they say they are. You know what I mean? And but I didn't recognize that was a snow rat. I was like, oh, the story. Yeah. So that's the thing. And then Toph noticing the drill. The only thing about this drill thing that I don't quite understand is like, unless like Gilak's people really did the math here, like knowing where people would stand and where like the sidelines are or whatever, like he could have just drilled and killed a bunch of people because you can't see like up in the ice. Like there's no way you could see where you're going. Am I wrong about that? Like so he just drilled up from the ground and it's like that could have hit people. I mean, Toph said run out of the way, run out of the way, and people start running. So like if they didn't start running out of the way, would they have been drilled to death? At least one or two of them? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I know there's a stupid detail to think about, but it's just something that came to my mind. I'm like, you could have just killed people, guys. This may not have been your best course of plan. Anyway, so yeah, I know Melina's kind of got this big speech, and it does kind of look like not evil, but like it's I think that's what makes Molina an interesting character. She's just so happy and excited for everybody, but she's so close-minded as to like how other people feel about this. But she really does care. You know what I mean? So that to me that's kind of interesting, even though like her movements and like what she's saying seems a little bit grander. I mean, it's grand and she clearly wants to help, but it's like look at the top panel, right? The one where the drill comes through the floor. Look at the top of it. It looks like she's like almost giving this evil speech, but with a smile on her face, like as if she wants to be helpful. I don't know. That's kind of what I get out of it. It was kind of funny joke when Toph was like, heads up, and this old lady's like, some of us are trying to listen to this. Like, I don't know what the point of that was. It's just kind of a funny panel. I don't know why that was a thing. But good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think right now the only thing that like Melina the mistake she's really making is that like she's not asking the question of like, do these people actually want to use their natural resources? Like, they've survived the war without that, even though they took heavy damage. That they survived the war without using their natural resources. They were fine before that. Do they absolutely need to do this? You think it's good and that will help, but it is a different culture. Like that, if this was the thing in the north, no problem. But like in the south, it's a different story. That's not necessarily how it works. But we move on. So Gilak opens up with a speech here, and he talks about, he's their true brother. Many of you know me. We came of age together. We shared meals together. We've bled in foreign lands. You know that I am blood of your blood and flesh of your flesh. You must believe me when I say that these two scoundrels from our so-called sister tribe are not here to help us. They're here to subjugate and humiliate us. They want to strip our land and destroy everything we are. Melina says, what are you talking about? Recently they discovered oil beneath our homeland, oil that will bring prosperity to your people is what Melina says. Oil they're going to claim for the north, and interestingly, Toph is the one to react to Gilak saying that and say, wait, what? And Melina says that's not true, and he brings up the briefcase that they got from part 1. This was the big plot point in part 1. Gilak's forces stealing Malik's briefcase. And Gilak says, I've read through the documents. I know all about your plan to make the Southern Water Tribe a colony of the North. You want the Northern Water Tribe to decide how the oil is extracted, what it's used for, and where it's shipped. What would the South be then if not a colony? And Molina is very much trying to interrupt him the whole time and say, that's not our plan, that's not our plan. And then finally she says, but it used to be. We never used the word colony, but we did worry that the South wasn't ready to handle such an important resource. We were wrong, and then Malik speaks up and says, no, we weren't. I tried to tell you, but you wouldn't listen, Molina. I never destroyed those documents. I never cancelled the plans. You would have found out sooner or later. So I think we'll leave it there, because obviously this is one of the big things from the part 2 description we were thinking about. Like I think it said Malik like speaks up to like defame Molina or something like that, and it ends up like not really being what happens, in that like he more kind of like ends up kind of defaming himself more so than anything, and that like him saying that more kind of makes you kind of like he kept this from Molina, that okay, she was wrong to basically keep the ultimate goal that they perhaps have changed the ideals on from everyone, but she's been trying to like alter the plan to the point where it is more fair to the South. But still it seems that fundamentally the plan is in essence what it originally was, but obviously Malik is trying to do it in a way where like the North controls everything, whereas Molina changed the plan to more be like, we'll help the South to like learn how to handle their natural resources and kind of use it effectively. It's an interesting main plot point to just present this idea of like, this is your original plan. Some of you have changed your opinions on Molina. How do you think about her now? How do you think about Malik now? But Kelly, what are your thoughts on this as like basically the key central plot point of this book?
Yeah, the actual like concept that in the briefcase it was proven that they were never going to help the South, that they were just going to use it for themselves. That's pretty damn messed up. For them to go in and have those ideas, and like pretty much for the most part. So it's specifically that they would have just taken the oil, or am I missing something else here? Like, because then Molina says, but we did worry that the South wasn't ready to handle such an important resource. So basically it's the idea that they didn't trust the South with it because they didn't understand it. So they were like, we're going to take it for ourselves and not help anybody with it. Okay. That's pretty messed up, actually. And for Molina to go in and do that from the start, that actually is kind of crazy. But once she came here, she realized, well, no, we can't do this to these people. She kind of grew a heart a bit. A little, or maybe she had one before and she's just really naive, pretty much. And she does really care or whatever, but it is kind of bad. I'm not gonna lie. Clearly you get Molina really does want to change, but I can understand why Katara would be upset. But I'm not gonna lie. Okay, so yeah, Malik then being like, "Nope, I never changed that. I always wanted to do that." That really kind of surprised me. I knew that in the description for the second book, it would say Malik would do something to defame Molina, and I was a little bit confused as to what was going to be as I was reading it. And it, like you said, that's not really what's happening here. It's more like he's just humiliating her, in the sense that like, she had no control over the situation the whole time. It was him. Even if he doesn't intend it to be that way, that is basically what he is saying. Like, we set out to do this thing. We're going to do it whether you want to or not. We're still going to go ahead with it anyway, which really does surprise me. Like, I don't know. It really seems like Malik really cares about his sister. And I'm like, that's like a really backstabby thing to do no matter what your beliefs are. Like, you should have just sat down Molina and been like, this is what I want to do. But then again, she would have probably said no, so I guess that's why he went behind her back. But even still, I was like, really? That's really messed up. I don't know, like a lot of messed up things are happening in these couple pages. Like, you would have found out sooner or later. Like, that's what he says at the bottom of 41. I'm like, oh my God, that's jeez, you know what I mean? And you kind of knew Malik was obviously going to be the one to, because of his beliefs and stuff. But I didn't expect to go about it in this way, that like their original plans were to do this, and then Malik kept doing it, and then Molina changed her mind. Like, they didn't communicate enough, and now the whole South is in jeopardy because of it. And I don't know if that's supposed to be a metaphor or what. So like, you got to communicate about these things with your siblings, because you could affect a lot of people because of it. I don't know. Where are we stopping? What page are we not?
End of 41. We're stopping.
The end of 41. Okay, so I was pretty much at the end there, with the reveal that like, he kept it from her and he would have kept doing the plans anyway. Yeah, like, and just it's pretty crazy. Yeah, I really don't know what else to say. I mean, I do like. I think I'm gonna wait till the next couple panels when stuff is going down to explain something I kind of don't like from this. But yeah.
Greg, what are your thoughts on these couple of pages here?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to sort of finally get their sort of real plan and to see it sort of here out in the open and, to finally get the idea, behind the sort of briefcase and why he was sort of so hung up on it getting moved around. I mean, you would think if he was really sort of trying to sort of hide his plans, he wouldn't sort of carry them around with him all the time, like maybe lock him up in the safe or something. I don't know what would have been the sort of better option for that, but no, it's definitely, it's a pretty sort of messed up plan regardless the fact that they sort of had this idea. I mean, I don't know, it makes me wonder, how they would actually sort of go through with this plan. Would they have the North basically sort of, come in with their forces around the oil refinery and sort of, cut it off from the rest of the tribe? Or, how would they sort of, go about, basically controlling this from the place where it's actually sort of being sort of mined from? So, however you look at it, it's a pretty generally sort of messed up plan. And just the fact that Malik was sort of hiding it from Molina, after she had, obviously had a change of heart with the whole sort of situation, is, I don't know, it definitely shows, more of Malik's sort of true sort of character, and we find out a bit more about that later on. But it's nice to see here how, Melina, she realized what she was doing necessarily wasn't sort of the right thing. And, we're assuming that Hakoda sort of helped her to sort of, see that sort of her ways were in error before it. But it's definitely sort of definitely sort of a messed up sort of situation here. And it's interesting to see how, how Team Avatar is sort of responding to these words here.
And yeah, after this, basically Malik proceeds to start digging his own grave. Like for some reason, he just doesn't realize that what he's saying is wrong, and just kind of puts his true feelings, no holding back, nothing kind of held back, to everyone. In that he insults Gilak here and says that man in that ridiculous tribal getup speaks the truth. Once that oil is out of the ground, it will be under northern control. Um, we see in the background the builder guys, Noah, Cam, and Sunjay, that we obviously met primarily in part one. They're going to basically try and protect somehow Melina and Malik because they see the situation that's going to develop. Malik just continues to say like it has to be done. And Gilak says, "Can you believe the gall of these Northerners? During the war, our blood kept them safe, and as if that wasn't enough, they now want our oil to make them rich." And he's like, "You think this is about money? You have no idea what this oil meal means. Not just for your own little backward society, but for the world. The oil changes everything." And the entire time in the background, Melina is constantly just telling him to stop because she's aware of, like, basically he is turning both of them into villains in what he's saying in this moment to the south. The oil is our pathway to a future of equality, and we can't trust the future to a culture so mired in the past. The Southerners need an oversight of an actual civilization. You all can't even come up with a cohesive set of laws. And at this point, Melina just kind of like steps in, like shoves Malik aside and just screams at him and just says, "Stop talking," and says, "People of the Southern Water Tribe, I deeply regret the hurt that my crew and I have caused. We are stepping down from the Southern Reconstruction Project effective immediately. We'll leave the South Pole first thing in the morning." And Gilak basically just says, "After what you've done, you don't get to just leave," and he orders the attack to come. And Melina is forced into a situation here where she has to basically protect her brother here. I thought this was a really interesting way to take it, in that you just have Malik finally say how he truly feels and just antagonize the entire situation. That he ultimately, the plans in the document are from him, so they are completely focused on the North and what they're going to do with the stuff from the South. And he's the one who we knew from part one felt like the South wasn't necessarily a proper culture, but now we see that he really means that. And I like throughout this whole thing that like Melina is just like, "Please stop talking," and it's just like, "No, we're gonna go. We're gonna abandon the entire plan, and we won't do anything because it's clear that this is just causing too much hassle." And Gilak obviously has the issue with that. I like how they've kind of been presenting Melina here, even though obviously she's made mistakes and is trying to make amends for them. That even at this moment, she's just like, no, we are not going to like cause a war here. We're just gonna like, if we're the cause of this problem, we won't be the problem anymore. We'll just leave. And I like that she's trying to keep some sort of a peace here, even though the situation is already out of control because Gilak is here. But Greg, what are your thoughts on this really interesting scene?
Yeah, no, this is really interesting just to see how Malik just sort of, he just doesn't have sort of an understanding of the situation, or he's just so blinded by his own sort of personal goals and his own sort of, vendetta, his own sort of hope for the future here that, he has nothing to hold back at this point. Like he insults the person that, is probably going to attack him and does eventually end up attacking him. And, all the people that he wants to sort of work with, the whole southern tribe here, he's basically just sort of outing himself and just sort of, saying the whole situation as it eventually will be. And it's just, I don't know, you really definitely get to see his sort of, his true sort of character here and sort of all of his sort of flaws that he has here. And, we get to see Molina sort of, try to take hold of the situation, which unfortunately she's not able to do anything until like the very sort of end here. But yeah, no, it's interesting just to see, how quickly, I guess it's good you can see her sort of, a bit of her true sort of character here, how she wants to sort of just leave everything sort of as it is. But of course, they sort of have gone too far at this point to really sort of pull out. But no, it's definitely, really sort of a messed up situation, what, their original sort of goals were for.
Yeah, like this is the scene where you see the true like hypocrisy of Malik, and that he talks about, the oil is a pathway to a future of equality, yet he just spends the entire thing here just kind of dismissing the South, that like they're not an actual civilization, that like he's willing to basically take everything away from the South to make the world better, while also not acknowledging that like shouldn't the South also be equal, and in doing this you're specifically making them not equal. So it's a really big problem what he's kind of presenting here. But Kelly, what are your thoughts on this?
Um, Yeah, so no, this is yeah really interesting, and I felt so bad for Melina during this whole thing. I'm just like, no, Malik, shut up. Again, but like it I did find it interesting that he was kind of screwing himself over here. I don't know if he realized he was screwing himself over, but he just didn't care because he was so pissed at having to keep everything a secret, or he was still pissed about having to keep everything a secret and didn't really think that this would be that bad to say. Like, I don't know what's going on in Malik's head here. He's just like, I'm tired of like saying these things I don't believe in. You guys all suck. That's basically what that's telling me. And that's like, that's not gonna help you, right? Like, oh my God, Malik is frustrating, man. And him actually revealing how he feels about all this, it's pretty crazy. And I don't know, man, like, I don't like it's crazy, honestly. Like the fact that he would say like, you have no idea what this oil means, this little backwards society. Like I understand if he thinks that like they are more equipped to handle the oil, but this is like straight up racism here. Or because like I think what really got me was when he was like, where was the line? You actually said it earlier, but I don't remember where it is. Where he was like this guy in this backwards getup or something like that, tribal getup or whatever. I'm like,
it's yeah, immediately after page 41.
Ridiculous trouble getter. Yeah, there it is. I was just like, what? Like, you didn't have to bring that into it at all. I understand your beliefs and you taking well, I don't understand them, but you understand his understanding of it, of him taking the oil, but like all this other stuff, it's just like, this is really offensive. Oh my God. And it's just, and the fact that Molina kind of once felt this way and is so disappointed in her brother, it's really, like, she looks so, like, upset. Like, and the fact, I don't know, like, to me, what I gathered from this is, like, Malik, you clearly don't care about your sister. You care more about your cause than you do your sister's feeling, because your sister is begging you for you to stop. Your sister clearly doesn't agree with you, and you kept the secret from your sister. I was just shocked that he would do all of this to his sister, because he said in the last book, the sister is like the most important, Melina is the most important person in the world to me. I'm like, all right, it doesn't act like, that does not seem like it right now. And what I did find fascinating at the bottom of page 43 was Melina's reaction to this. Like, once she was able to get Malik to shut up, that he was like, okay, we really hurt you guys. We'll just go. Which I actually really think was the wrong course of to a way to amend that, because I actually get what Gilak is saying here. Like, you can't just like have done all of these things and get to leave. Obviously, not hurt them. That Gilak is crazy for trying to like hurt them and kill them, but like the idea that Molina was just like, all right, we'll go. Sorry, bye. I think that was just like a defense mechanism. Like, she was trying to defend herself. Like, yeah, we really messed up. We're gonna leave. We're not. They weren't paying for their actions for what they were doing, and they weren't trying to think of. She at that moment she wasn't trying to think of solutions to maybe amend this instead of just cut and running. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I thought that was kind of an interesting reaction to that whole speech. Molina was just like, "We'll leave. We don't want to hurt you anymore. We're really sorry." But it's like, that's kind of like, what? Like, you can't just leave after all of that. So, especially since it's still going on, especially since you're still technically rebuilding the South, you know. So, it was a really interesting scene, although it's so frustrating. It's like, I feel so bad for her here, even though it is terrible what she originally was going to do. It's like, at least she was able to understand more over time, and she's more open-hearted. Her brother is just so, like, bleh.
So we move on. The attack obviously comes in here from Gilak, and immediately Aang is just like, look, whatever Molina and Malik have done, they don't deserve to die. Katara and I will get them somewhere safe. Toph says, Captain Boomerang and I will keep everyone else from pummeling each other. And Sokka's like, Captain Boomerang? And she's just like, oh, don't act like you don't love it when I call you Captain Boomerang. And this is obviously a reference. I think the first time she called him Captain Boomerang was in the finale of Book 3, during their kind of obviously airship raid stuff. So this is a reference to ATLA. Pretty deep cut of a reference as well, just bringing up this nickname again. But yeah, Hakoda is then alerted to the fact that Gilak is in the city. He and his crew runs back in as the kind of action scenes start. Katara and Aang being the best benders around, obviously, like, take command, taking out people with ease. Katara steps in to defend Molina and Malik. Melina's like, I want to explain, but Katara says not now. And as she's distracted, the worker guy Noah kind of steps in and kind of knocks Katara down with a giant pillar. So she takes a pretty huge hit there. And Melina's like, you idiot, she was saving us. And they just want to get Molina and Malik out. And Noah even says something here, and showing that, like, he to some extent agrees with them, because he's probably obviously from the north. No, we got to make sure you're all right. She'll be fine. They're used to that kind of brutality down there. So, like, to some extent, Malik and these guys considered the Southerners to be like savages, basically. And as Katara's getting up, Thod comes out, or I think that's his name, Thod. Comes over to her and says, do you finally grasp the point of my story, Katara? They may invite you to their campfire. They may flatter you with pretty words. They may even put together a lovely festival for you, but make no mistake, in their eyes, you'll never be anything more than a snow rat. We must remove the foreigners from our midst, or they will destroy us. Now, will you support Gilak's cause? And she again says no, and he's just like, I believed in you, young Katara, I really did. And he then chi blocks her. He does some chi blocking on her shoulders to kind of stop her from waterbending with her arms, and it's a big reveal here that he can do this. And he's basically just talks about her loyalties and so on, as Aang kind of gets himself out of a kind of bad situation as well with some powerful airbending. So we're covering a lot of ground here, but it's primarily action stuff here, where there's not a ton to talk about, and the fights aren't really anything like hugely impressive. I think the main thing to talk about here is definitely the continuation of the Snow Rat story thing, and that once again it's just this idea that, like, they may try with you, but you're always only ever going to be what they thought you were in the first place. You'll be there sitting with them, but you don't actually get a say. And obviously I think this is meant to reference the whole idea of the South in terms of its how it deals with, like, being on the world stage, that, like, they'll be at the table with everyone else, but they won't have an opinion because the North basically take the South's opinion, that the North will speak for the South, and the South are just the snow rat in that situation. But it's still interesting that, again, Katara still won't side with them because she knows that they're extremists. And then first hint of water tribers kind of knowing chi blocking is really interesting. I wonder if there's a backstory to it, but I'm not fully sure. But Kelly, what are your thoughts on a lot of this action stuff and a lot of little bits of dialogue here?
Yeah, it's really interesting, especially that cheat blocking reveal. I did not see that coming. I don't think anyone really did. I don't know how this. Honestly, like that's another big mystery of the Avatar universe. Where is this cheat blocking lessons being like traveled around? You know what I mean? Like you got like Ty Lee being like supposedly the only one knowing how to do it, and then this random Southern waterbender, and then all these other things. Sorry about that in the background. But yeah, I don't know where. I'm almost starting to think it's just kind of if we want something interesting to happen, make them a chi blocker. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I would want to know a little bit more about how how those lessons are being taught around. Anyway, back to what's going on here in the action. The action's really cool. It's really good animation. The way they animated the water is actually really nice. Like there's more layers to it than there usually is if you actually look at some of the panels. And I like how Molina is doing everything she can to defend herself and her brother, but she's also trying to like beg to Katara, like, please just let me explain what's going on. And then she's just getting beat up by all these by Molina's people, and you can understand why Katara just feels so hurt. But it's also kind of where my frustration comes in. And this kind of goes a little bit ahead of this panel too, but just in general, I'm not a big fan of plots where clearly there's somebody who's not evil, but then somebody thinks they're evil because they don't have the time to explain themselves. Like I'm not a big fan of like you're misunderstanding them. You're just so angry that you're not listening to them, even though like this whole idea, like okay, wait, no, but I changed. I'm not the same as I was before. You have to believe me. And then like it just kind of almost feels like a retread of the Zuko thing, actually, now that I think about it. With Katara not trusting Molina right now and sort of later too. It's just like I'm not a fan of that kind of plot in general. I know it's interesting, I guess, but it's just I just wanted to bring that up. I think it's kind of a nuisance kind of thing. They could have handled it differently. But back to the actual fighting. The Snow Rat story being brought up again, really good timing for that. And I think the only reason Katara says no is because she knows Aang would be disappointed. Like, she just kind of looks over at Aang and then is like, no. Like, I know Aang would not want me to do this, and you're hurting our people. You're trying to hurt other people, even though these people were trying to trick us. I won't let people hurt each other. But at the same time, she's also like, yeah, I do agree with you guys, but you guys are kind of being jerks about it, you know? Like, she kind of thought about it for a second, you know? So that's just kind of how low it is for Katara right now. And yeah, I don't really have anything much else to say. Aang doing some cool airbending and stuff. But again, I'm not a big fan of the whole, like, don't let the person explain themselves and let the other person be pissed until the other one makes a sacrifice or something, or I should have known all along you changed, or I don't know where this is going to go. I hope they handle it well.
Yeah, there's a scene with Molina and Katara towards the end of the book that is definitely going to be interesting to discuss when we get there. But Greg, what are your thoughts on all of this action stuff, the reference back to the story, and so on?
Yeah, no, I think the action overall is pretty well. I like how they sort of, play it out from scene to scene, just seeing them, trying to defend Molina and Malik and just sort of seeing their own sort of crew comes in to help. I mean, I think it's interesting that they make a point of it on one frame to have Katara sort of halfway get up, but you see sort of Molina and Malik sort of running away, even though Molina sort of wanted to help Katara when she sort of got knocked down by her own sort of men there. It makes me wonder if, later on in the book, would it have turned out better if Molina actually sort of went out to help her. But it's interesting the fact that they sort of bring back the story here and just, understanding how sort of relevant it is here and how it just sort of, like Kelly said, how Katara really sort of has to sort of think about it. But, I think it's really just their extreme sort of methods that they're willing to take that really sort of puts Katara off from the whole sort of situation here. And the fact that she, sort of gets chi blocked doesn't sort of help the situation either. So no, I think it's definitely an interesting sort of set of scenes that they have here. And it's not really sort of like the greatest sort of action scene ever because it's sort of benders against sort of non-benders and sort of one-sided for the most part. But they make it sort of interesting just to sort of see these people sort of just trying to sort of at least fight for what they think is right in this moment.
I will just say with the action, I think the scene with Aang really kind of shows that since basically the end of ATLA, he feels so much more powerful in the comics and that he's able to handle so many people by himself at once. Like, I don't think in the show he would have been able to, like, do an airbending kick at a drill that size and knock it over, but he's at this stage where he's approaching his like prime as like I suppose as an avatar, and his powers are increasing, and you see that he's just instantly able to do that and like then throw the other two guys aside with very little problems. And then as we transition into the what Sokka and Toph are doing in the fight, we see how skilled Toph is as well. So we get Sunjae and the other two, Noah and Cam, fighting as well. And Toph just comes over and sees that Sunjae is fighting as an earthbender with like gauntlets on his fists, and they're pretty big rock fists. And then she's just like, "Cool, nice earth gauntlets." And then he's just like, "Oh look, I made myself a pair too," and they're like 5 times as big as his, and she has like the biggest grin ever on her face as she's gonna super enjoy just smashing these three who have obviously just hurt Katara, and she just annihilates them with like one earth punch. I really love this moment. Like when I first read this, obviously like having a really unique reading experience, like knowing that like I was just reading it and like no one else was gonna read the book for like a couple of weeks, I was just like laughing to myself because we haven't had that many scenes where we've just completely referred back to the fact that like Toph is like one of the best benders in like the entire show, and she is just so much more powerful than like everyone else. And the fact that she can still do this while being somewhat limited by the fact that she's like primarily surrounded by snow and ice is just really, really impressive on that front. But Sokka gets his chance to shine as well with his non-bender combatants. He fights against people who also have boomerangs, and he's just like, better than you as a boomeranger, absolutely, as he smashes 2 people with it, gets it back. Katara stands back up and reveals that, oh, she's kind of, her style, she's kind of refined it a little bit and now can do some pretty awesome waterbending with her feet as she kind of ices Thawed. And Hakoda's guards come in and basically round some of the people up as they kind of go out to basically encounter Hakoda and so on. And we do get an important plot point here in that, like Katara says, your arms, they're okay, they're starting to tingle again, just highlighting that like within a couple of moments she's probably going to be able to bend with her arms again, which is important given what actually happens. But yeah, we go outside and we see this is the boy who, with the other girl, helped to steal the briefcases, just wearing warrior armor here. He punches Malik in the face and knocks him out as they've kind of surrounded Molina. And Gilak comes out here at this point in time. She tries to fight them off, but they're captured in a net. The 2 kids reveal that they also have chi blocking training as well. They say that Thawed trained them. And we'll end this section of the comic just with the moment of that Gilak is about to kind of like basically in his mind like demonstrate the true power of the South by just killing Molina and Malik basically in cold blood right here in front of everyone to kind of show the power of the tribe. It's a really dramatic scene, but Kelly, what are your thoughts on some of the other bits of action here, Toph and Sokka primarily, and then transitioning into the dramatic scene with Molina and Malik?
Yeah, the action here is pretty fun. It's kind of a mix of like really well animated action, but also having fun with it as well. There's like dialogue bubbles to be seen, so it's not like completely just wham whack blah, which I actually don't like. I don't like it when it's just that. I kind of want more going on than that because that's a waste of good pages, just for action that we won't ever really properly be able to see, even though it's really well drawn. I'm just saying like I kind of want other things going on as well, which is why the Toph scene is actually pretty funny. It wasn't laugh out loud funny to me, but that is such a look of evil on her face, like, and they're like, we're dead faces, especially that guy with the 2 dots for eyes. It's like whenever somebody's far away, they animate somebody like that, but they did that for that guy just because he was scared. So yeah, that was pretty good. 2 quick questions. Actually, no, you know what? One I'll say for later after we're done discussing it. I'm forgetting where Captain Boomerang was from because I've heard it on ATLA, but I don't remember actually when it was said. Do you want to remind me? Because I actually forgot.
It was Sozin's Comic Part 3 Into the Inferno. I don't remember the exact scene, but I did look this up. Someone asked me a question on Tumblr about like what references were in it, and I specifically checked it up. So at some point in the 3rd part of the finale of ATLA, she does call him that.
Captain Boomerang. I know that, but for some reason I can't remember which part. That's bothering me now. I'm gonna look that up later. Sorry about that. I was just like, where was that from? Anyway, yeah, it was really funny. I also kind of like how the Southern soldiers are trying to be like, okay, you're one of us. Like, why are you fighting for them? And it's like, well, yeah, no, I'm not gonna let you hunt down my dad's girlfriend. I don't know. That kind of reminded me of Do you remember the Core Book One? And Jinoro was like, "Don't hurt my dad's ex-girlfriend." Like that's
Mm.
such a weird thing to say, but it's kind of reminded me of that. Like, why bring that particularly up? Like, not hurt anybody. But I guess that's also kind of how Sokka's feeling right now. Because if you looked at that speech, he looked really hurt too. Like, I think Katara and Sokka were like, "What?" Like they were both looked really hurt, and I think he's just kind of trying to equate it as his dad really cares about this person, so I won't let you hurt her, but also I'm really pissed at her too, kind of thing. That's kind of what I got out of it. And I liked how he's like, no, I don't think I'm a better person, but I am Captain Boomerang. Like that was like a really good still, like really good shot of Sokka, just knocking him out. Good stuff, good stuff. And then, Katara being such an awesome waterbender, she could use her legs. That really didn't surprise me too much. I knew she was going to get out of it because I was like, if you only she blocked her arm, she could. And then it did exactly what I thought. She used her legs. And I guess he's not that good of a chi blocker because she already starts to get her feeling back in her arms, which I'm going to bring up again later because I still think something that happens later doesn't make a lot of sense based on what happened here, but whatever. And it's all right. This is not supposed to be funny, but it kind of looks like Katara's doing the Naruto run because she can't feel her arms.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just something I thought was funny. Like she's doing the arms flailing behind her because she can't feel them. That's something I wanted to bring up. Where are we stopping? The part where Molina and Malik get kidnapped?
Basically, the last panel is just with like Gilak about to like
They're in
kill
the.
the two of them. Yeah, with the.
Oh wow,
holding the
that part.
knife.
Okay. Yeah, so that was crazy. I was really scared. I thought like Melina was gonna like cover Malik and get like seriously injured. Maybe not. It's a comic. They're not gonna kill anybody. But like, I thought Melina was gonna like defend Malik even after everything he did, and she would have to suffer, and she wouldn't be able to defend herself. But that's not what happened. Obviously, I predicted that wrong. And yeah, no, it's just crazy that he was gonna kill them. Like, look at her. I was like, geez, this comic is going dark. I mean, it's gone dark before, but like, I don't know. I didn't see that coming. I didn't expect it to go that crazy, but that's how crazy Gillick has really become. So, yeah. So that's that.
Okay,
And then,
the Captain Boomerang, where it comes from, is Into the Inferno, so third part of the finale. Sokka says, go Aang, airbending slice, and Suki's like, shouldn't we be helping him? Sokka says, the Fire Lord is Aang's fight, we need to stay focused on stopping that fleet from burning down the Earth Kingdom. And Toph just says to Sokka sarcastically, and how do we do that, Captain Boomerang? I can't see outside this floating hunk of metal. And Sokka just says,
yeah, I remember
"Airshoot
that
twice."
line. I remember that line now. How are you gonna do that, Captain Boomerang? Yeah, I remember that. I knew it was from that episode. I just couldn't remember which part. And it was such like a memorable line that you're like, how do we remember? How do we remember that? Like we know she's called him Captain Boomerang before. It's just like when? Okay, thank you. That's bothering me.
But Greg, what are your thoughts on some of this action stuff leading up to that dramatic moment with Melina and Gilak?
Yeah, no, I think this action is pretty cool. It's nice to see just Toph sort of, it really shows, I guess, just the strength of our characters in general, just Team Avatar, just sort of how far they have come with Aang and sort of Toph's ability, and even, Sokka and just sort of his, just general prowess now that he has with the boomerang. Like, he now has, perfect control over it, whereas before, he used to, sort of question sort of where boomerang will go or if it would always sort of come back. So it's nice to see, our characters sort of get their sort of standout moments. Even Katara being, slightly incapacitated is still able to sort of hold her own in this sort of situation here. So it's definitely interesting just to see how this sort of plays out and just to see, the abilities of the other side as well. Just to see that we have, an additional two characters that have the ability to sort of chi block here, and just, the fact that, before we thought this was only sort of, localized to just Ty Lee, basically, to see that other people have sort of developed this, sort of ability. It really definitely seems like just something people have just developed to sort of counter, Bender. So it's interesting that they just sort of had this in this book where, the whole idea of being sort of equal with Bender sort of was brought up here. So it's interesting to see another sort of characters that can sort of do it here. And, it's interesting just to see the extremes that Gilak is willing to go to in this sort of situation and sort of what happens later on. I mean, for some reason, I wasn't sort of as sort of, scared for them in this sort of moment just because of how it sort of was set up. But, it sort of makes the scenes that does sort of happen later on all the more sort of important and sort of, makes you sort of more sort of scared for sort of what could happen, just sort of seeing how far he's sort of willing to go in these sort of situations.
Yeah. So as we kind of transition here, I will read out Gilak's line from the last page we covered there. Forgiveness between family is easy, but you aren't family, are you? You may look like us and dress like us, but but you were never a part of the tribe. He's saying this to Molina, obviously, which basically highlights the fact that she was trying to be kind of come part of somewhat Southern culture, but he's not letting her here. And he says, now the tribe needs the two of you to serve as an example. Your demise will be a warning to all foreign powers who think they can come trample over our people, that they need to think again. As he swings down his sword, but Hakoda arrives to stop his hand, pretty epically, just grabbing his arm. And he just says, let them go, Gilak, as we get the confrontation we've kind of been waiting for a bit. And Gilak says, hear me out, brother. I have proof that, and Hakoda cuts in and says that when Molina first came here, she'd planned to bring us under northern control. I know. And he's like, what? Then why can you defend her? And he says, because after she got to know our people, she changed her mind. And he just says, it's a ruse, Hakoda, to gain your trust. And he says, Hakoda says, Fire Lord Zuko was once our sworn enemy. Now he's one of our fiercest allies. I believe people can change. And Gilak responds saying, and sadly now I believe it too, because you've changed, Hakoda. I used to think that you were simply blinded by your idealism, but now I see the truth. You're a traitor. As they begin a kind of hand-to-hand, weapon-to-weapon fight, Hakoda is clearly the more agile one. He dodges, blocks, he kicks Gilak in the stomach, and then basically Gilak lunges at him. Hakoda uses his club and just kind of very easily disarms him and talks about Gilak, do you remember Whale Tail Island? Yes, of course. There were two Fire Nation guards who got the jump on you, and I almost broke my neck trying to escape. But then you saved me, and we defeated those two guards together. Despite all that's happened in the last couple of days, that's how I think of you still. That's who you are to me. So let's talk this through, Gilak, as brothers. As he offers his hand for I assume the standard, Water Tribe handshake, where you basically grab each other's kind of elbow almost, that kind of handshake thing that they do. But Gilak, in his other hand behind his back, has a knife, and as the hand is offered, he basically just says, brothers, and stabs Hakoda right in the gut here, and it's a really dramatic moment. Molina kind of screams, you can see kind of tears forming in her eyes. Aang and Katara arrive. Katara is in tears as well, as she really powerfully waterbends at this point in time, and basically brings the entire thing to a halt here, as just everyone catches up with everyone, everyone's captured, and it's left for Katara to heal her father. But let's talk primarily about what Gilak and Hakoda talk about here, because I think it's really interesting that this is kind of the core between them, the idea that Gilak has always thought of Hakoda as kind of an idealist, maybe overly optimistic, but his belief that people can change, using Zuko as an example, and Molina now as a more recent example. And he's kind of, I suppose, begging the question of Gilak, why can't you change? Why are you so stuck in the past? Why can't you change your opinions at all? And be somewhat open to anything happening here? But you get that that's kind of the core between them, the idea of change, and he's even willing to kind of offer his hand to him, but Gilak just won't accept it, because at this point in time he considers just that the South needs a stronger leader in his mind that will make the tough choices, and he can't see Hakoda doing that, so he tries to kill him, because obviously Gilak's idea being that by killing Molina and Malik, he will just send this message to everyone to not mess with the South. And it's just this idea that how did Gilak get to this point where he thought that killing two people in cold blood who have as of now not actually done anything overly wrong. They've helped to rebuild the South to the point where it's a city now, but they haven't properly started doing all the mining stuff and world stage stuff just yet, but he's willing to just kill them over this. It's pretty kind of extreme on his part, and this is kind of the final step of him properly becoming a villain, stabbing someone he thought of as a close comrade for so long. But Kelly, what are your thoughts on this really, really dramatic section of the book here?
Yeah, this was really crazy. This fight between him and Gilak, Hakoda and Gilak was really cool. Um, Even like it was just like one panel. It was just, oh man. It was really well done. It was well written. The only thing I have to question is I don't understand how Hakoda got that information. Like if he wasn't at the rally to see the speech and see what Molina was trying to say and see what everyone was trying to say, how did he know? Like, and like it says here, like, here, hear me out, brother. I have proof that when Molina first came here, she planned to bring the Northern Control. I know. Is it the idea that Molina told Hakoda in private?
Yeah, like they're
Like,
in a relationship
like
and she was
I
really
know, like,
honest. Yeah, I think that's the
yeah, but
implication.
that's kind of okay, cool. All right. I say that, but also I'm kind of like, that's kind of important information, Dakota. Like, what? And I don't think she was ever going to tell anybody that publicly. Like, I don't know. I find a, like, I totally get why Hakoda kept it a secret because they're in a relationship, but I also kind of, I do find it a little bit bad that he kept it a secret. Like, that's really like, I don't know how I feel about it. All right, whatever. I'm just gonna move past it. It's a little crazy to have that kind of secret on your head because you're in a relationship. Like there's, I don't like cats, and then there's, I was gonna take all of these resources from you and stab you guys in the back. Like I don't know, like those two secrets kind of do they one's a little bit heavier than the other, but whatever. Let's just move on from this. Okay. So now that I understand that a little bit better, now that Dakota already knows. I really do like what he says here. Like people can change, and he used Fire Lord Zuko as an example. Like that's why he's so trusting. Like I know that she changed because I'm with her. You know what I mean? And it was just so it was very interesting. And they keep bringing up this Whale Tail Island thing because I think they said they wanted to have an episode on Whale Tail Island, so they're just doing everything they can to like think of a random island near the Southern Water Tribe. Let's just bring up Whale Tail Island again. It just keeps popping back up. I wanna go there at one point. Like let's just get to this place already. Anyway, this is a really interesting conversation. Like but you saved me. We defeated them together. We were brothers. We can still be brothers. And Gilak's just too extremist at this point. I am not kidding you. I think I cursed out loud, like F, like I didn't say F, I said, like really loudly. And I was in the kitchen in my house, and I forgot my grandfather was in the next room. I was just like, ah! I was like, because I did not see this go. Even with them grabbing the knife for some reason, I just ignored that panel. And when I read the next panel, I was like, I went, what? Like, I did not see that coming at all. I was, like, in shock. Like, pretty much as Molina and Katara were here. I was like, what the hell? And I say that because I was freaking out so much because I think that's, like, the exact same spot he was stabbed with the thing. And, like, this guy just keeps getting his sides destroyed. Like, remember in the Day of Black Sun when he got the harpoon in his side? It's like, that's the same exact spot. So it's like, that's bad. That's really bad. And it is really bad. I mean, he's gonna recover, but like I didn't know actually for a little bit. I was like, is there a reason it's specifically in that same spot? It wasn't the Day of Black Sun? Is it like that's a really bad looking knife? It looks like he went all the way through. It's like I don't know. I was really surprised. And then Katara kicked some serious ass in like 2 seconds. I feel like Aang could have. Well, no, Aang did help. I'm sorry, I didn't realize Aang was the one that got the other guys. I thought that was Katara. I didn't see that correctly. Oh man, so emotional. That really messed me up. I thought he was like literally gonna die. I thought it was gonna be a case of like Jet, where Katara would come over to the side and be like, "Oh my God, no, I can't do anything." Like I know it's a kids comic, but like they have did it so effectively that I thought something really bad was gonna like happen. But I guess he'll be fine. But it looks bad.
Yeah, like is this the first time we've ever seen someone like be injured by like physical means in the show? Like that wasn't bending? Like we've had a lot of characters with like knives and swords, but I don't think we've ever seen someone like actually like cut someone or like properly stab anyone.
I would have to think about it. I did.
Like
There was that time where
hmm?
Korra fought Unalaq, not Unalaq. Oh my God, I forget his name. The guy, episode 8 of book 1.
Oh, Tarlok.
And thank you. I forget all their names. And she was starting to get cut by the ice things.
Yeah,
But then again, that's not a weapon. That's still bending. That's not like
yeah.
if you're talking about like somebody getting stabbed or cut. I think again the closest thing is when Hakoda was harpooned on the side like that. Like that wasn't bending. That was a physical harpoon that went through his side. So like,
What was it? I thought he just went into a Fire Nation outpost and like he got hit by a
He got
fire blast.
no, no. Do you not remember the weapon went off? Okay, so he went in there, and then you heard the weapon, the thing like go off or whatever. And I always thought that was like part of the, not the whole thing. Obviously, he would be killed, but I always thought that was part of the. I don't know. I always imagined it was, but the way it was animated, I always thought it was part of the. I thought it wasn't a firebending wound. I thought it was a physical like explosion
Hmm.
wound, like from the weapon. It didn't
Hmm.
look like firebending to me, but I could be wrong. I could be very
Yeah.
wrong. I always imagined that differently as a kid. Anyway, I don't know. We can look into that later. I'm sure maybe
Hmm.
one or twice there was something similar to it.
Yeah, because like pretty much the worst injury we've seen is obviously Jet dying because he effectively got his like insides crushed by earthbending, implied, even though we didn't really see it. Like, and then other than that, it's kind of mainly been like burns and stuff like that from fire. We haven't seen a ton of like injuries. So like this had an impact because it was one of the first times we've just seen like a stabbing in the comics. But Greg, I suppose, what were your thoughts on these moments?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely one of the more sort of serious moments we've ever sort of have seen in the comics or the TV series in general. Just, just the sheer sort of physicality of it, I think really sort of brings it home, sort of how dangerous the situations that they can be in. I mean, I think with Bendon, sometimes you can see it as sort of an abstraction as of, the actual sort of danger that they're in sometimes, unless it, depending on the situation. But here you just sort of see it sort of up close and personal, and the fact that these two were sort of really sort of close together just makes it seem even the worse for it, just because they used to really see each other as almost as brothers in arms and everything that sort of has happened here. So it's definitely, it definitely holds, a very sort of serious sort of moment. And for the next sort of couple period of pages, you definitely think that possibly Hakoda could sort of die in this situation. And it turns out that that's not sort of the case, but it definitely seems like it's something that sort of definitely could have happened, especially with just sort of Malik and Molina's almost getting killed in the scene before. So I think it's definitely sort of it definitely holds true, and just brings all the more seriousness to the situation that they're involved here. So I thought it was done, it was executed very well.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that they give you Melina's reaction to Hakoda being stabbed before Katara's. I think it's just one of those ones where they like really wanted to kind of very much establish that like if you have any doubts over her in terms of like that relationship with Hakoda, don't. She actually loves him as well. That the only issues are just what her initial intents were coming down to the south and how she's going to explain them and stuff like that going forward. That the relationship isn't an issue. But yeah, we continue on. We obviously get Katara primarily stopping Gilak in this moment as he's captured. Um, what I think is meant to be a really powerful waterbending moment, kind of amplified by emotions, which we don't often get those moments. So that was pretty cool. But very emotional as she comes over to her father, who's basically unconscious on the ground, and they do the dialogue really well in that she kind of says no, 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 dad. We cut panel and we just have her starting to heal him as she switches from saying dad to saying daddy. I'm here, daddy. Stay with me. Stay with me as we cut away and eventually come back and we see that he's going to be okay. He's badly injured, but Katara's healing right then immediately after it happening has helped. He's resting in Paku and Gran Gran's house. And it's just a really nice moment as they kind of like are happy to have him back. He says you saved my life to Katara. Sokka says you had us scared for a bit there, and Gran Gran speaks up. Like we haven't really had a lot of Gran Gran, but she speaks up and says some interesting things here. This isn't good. You coming to visit my hut twice in 2 days. This isn't good at all. Wounds flow from wrong actions. Wrong actions flow from wrong beliefs. Someone needs to re-examine their beliefs. Sokka immediately pipes up and says, yeah, and that someone is Gilak. Hope that's what he's doing while he sits in jail tonight. Katara says, you mean those someones are Molina and Malik? And they kind of argue and say, like, look, obviously, giving all that oil over to the north is crazy. And Katara says, taking that oil out of the ground in the first place is crazy. And he's like, no, Molina and Malik's overall plan is for the south is a good one, but the war is over. It's a brand new era. Get with the times. And Katara walks out saying, uh, not if it means forgetting who we are, as obviously they come out and basically tell Aang and Toph that Hakoda will be okay. And Toph says to Katara, interesting one here, listen, Katara, if I'd known that Molina and Malik, what Molina and Malik were up to, I never would have let Earth and Fire Industries do business with them. And I suppose we'll cut it off here because the important Molina Katara scene happens next. But I do think it's very interesting what Grand's talking about here, and I suppose who is the one who actually needs to re-examine their beliefs at this point in time, and that I think that's pretty telling, in that they kind of run through most of the key people who do need to change their beliefs. Is it Gilak? Is it Molina? Is it Malik? Or I suppose what they're kind of, I think, actually hinting at, is it actually Sokka and Katara who are ultimately the ones who will have to come to a compromise in the end, based off seeing such extreme points of views, and come to a better conclusion about what way to do it properly. I'm not entirely sure, but it's definitely interesting. It's one of the few points in the entirety of North and South so far where I felt like Sokka is actually like properly important. Like his opinions on things is actually quite important here, in that him saying the core of their plan is actually pretty good, even if we don't agree with everything. And that's probably one of the first serious lines he's had in the comic, and I kind of appreciate that, even though I really wish they'd kind of done more with him up to now, but they can still do more. But Kelly, what's your take on this? The kind of aftermath to this, the Katara healing Hakoda, and then the aftermath.
Yeah, I thought this was really interesting. I kind of would, I mean, Sokka, another thing that was kind of odd was Sokka wasn't there when Hakoda got stabbed, so that was a thing. I don't know why he wasn't there. Was he like fighting the people in the town, I guess? I guess
Yeah,
I
he
guess
and
that was
Toph
why.
were fighting. We're stopping everyone else from fighting in the town.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I was wondering where he was. I was like, this seems kind of important, but I was like, okay, he doesn't know. So yeah, no, this is nice that he's okay and he'll be all right, and that that I don't know. It's funny that Gran is kind of like, you coming to visit my hut twice in 2 days. This isn't good at all. I'm like, what does she mean by that? I don't. Is she saying like, oh, the fact that he was hurt twice, or somebody was hurt twice, people keep getting hurt? Is that what she meant by that? Because I was like, what's the problem with people visiting you? Like, I don't know. I couldn't quite get what she was saying there. But the wounds flow from wrong actions, and wrong actions flow from wrong beliefs. Someone needs to re-examine their beliefs. Like, that's an interesting line, I guess. It's kind of weird hearing the term wrong beliefs, because it's one of those things where there's parts of society that's like, well, no one ever really has wrong beliefs. It's more about what you do with those beliefs and your actions. But it does say here, wrong actions flow from wrong beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, yeah, that does make sense. I don't know. It's kind of a strange thing. And honestly, the bottom of page 71 is kind of the stuff I thought we would be getting a lot earlier in the book. And I'm glad that we're starting to get that now. I mean, I'm not glad. I never liked seeing Katara Sokka fight, but it's finally getting to the meat of things. And I agree with you, Morgan, that it's Sokka, finally kind of putting a stamp on like how he sees things, and like him having a legitimate opinion instead of him being comedic relief the whole time. He's like, look, no, Molina and Malik's overall plan is the South is a good one. It's the war's over. We're good. Get with the times. He actually was pissed off by that. You know what I mean? That Katara thought that Molina and Malik, were completely in the wrong, for even getting the oil out of the ground. Like, that's something I didn't quite understand. I didn't understand why Katara was like taking the oil out of the ground in the first place is crazy. Like, she really does now believe in Gilak's. Here's the thing. They both think that the other one was right, but they were both extreme. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of, we're almost getting to Great Divide again here, people. Let's hope it doesn't take that. Let's hope it doesn't take that route. I'm kidding, obviously, but the idea that they both believe in two different things, the whole, you have to take care of yourself kind of thing, versus like, what's the future? What's easier? Actually, it's kind of flipped now, because Katara is the one that's like, okay, never mind. Anyway, the idea that Sokka agrees with Molina and Malik, but they were too extreme and went a different direction, and Katara agrees with Gilak, but they were too extreme and went in a different direction. It's like, oh boy, that's gonna be quite the. And the fact that they were only able to do that in like 3 panels, that's pretty good. I really hope they like continue this in the next book, and like really well. I really want to see them have to like have this disagreement and talk to each other about it, or yell at each other about it, and then eventually come to an agreement and. I don't know, and remember family is family. I'm hoping that's the case. I hope Sokka's opinions don't get like shoved to the side again. I mean, look at the cover of the 3rd book. It looks like he's just being silly comedic relief again, and it's like, the Lance and Voltron in these situations, which you'll understand if you watch that show. But yeah. So here's one thing I don't get. When Toph tells Katara, listen, Katara, if I'd known what Molina and Malik were up to, I never would have let the Earth Industries do business with them. Did she never have a proper meeting with them? Because if she did, she would know they were lying. Because she can tell when people are lying.
I suppose over the course of this story, they're basically saying that her lie detector powers aren't working because of the snow, so she couldn't sense that
Yeah,
up to
but she
now.
just arrived in the southern. Well,
Mm.
I'm saying, I guess I imagined those meetings taking place in the Earth and Fire Refinery,
Yeah.
not in the Southern Water Tribe. Like, she came to the Southern Water Tribe because Malika Molina went to the Earth and Fire Refinery in her place. So,
Uh,
like, how did she not tell they were lying?
I got the implication that like this deal had potentially the meetings had happened prior to Toph, maybe even being involved with the Earth and Fire Refinery at all
Oh,
prior to
like
the
this is a
rift.
continuation.
Yeah,
Like now that she's part of it, she can go continue those
yeah.
meetings in this underwater tribe. Okay, to me, I just thought it was weird. I'm like, can't you tell if they're lying or not? I understand she can't see well in the snow, but I figured I don't know. That's probably why they brought up the whole can't see well in the snow thing because he can't tell if they're lying. So they wrote themselves out of that pretty easily. I'm all right. I'm good. I'm done because I know that we're going to the next part now. So yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting though, like that this is about the most of like Toph's involvement in the story. Like outside of like her having funny moments and being involved in the fights, this one like line that she says here is really her entire involvement up to now in the book, and that kind of wondering like, are we gonna get Toph's opinion on the matter in like part three? Because I still feel like I kind of like, could you explain a little bit more about why you now feel that like it is not right to do business with them, because like I don't know, from a business perspective, I would kind of almost take it that like, okay, maybe her father's trying to turn over a new leaf, is maybe listening to Toph a bit more, so like her making the decision here that like I don't agree that they're just dismissing the South in this case, and she's making that decision here. It feels like there's still something more from Toph to come, and that I suppose it applies to Aang as well, and that we don't get any of Aang's opinion on this matter. He's just been like a complete neutral up to now, by virtue of not knowing anything about what's going on here at all. So I think that's kind of part of it here, is that they've kept Sokka away from being serious. Toph has only just come back. Aang's only just come back. So we're mainly just dealing with like Katara's opinion on things. But Greg, I suppose, what are your thoughts on these couple of pages here?
Yeah, no, I definitely see, more of the other sort of characters' sort of opinions sort of coming into play later on. I mean, the fact that we do get, sort of any sort of opinion from Toph and sort of Sokka here, just as far as what they think about the plans or what they think about sort of the original plans that Malik and Melina sort of had, speaks that there is, at least I hope that there is sort of more to come. And, the fact that, both of the plans, either Gilak's or Malik and Melina's is definitely sort of, at least the original ones are definitely on the stream side. It definitely seems like there's going to have to be, some sort of balance that they'll later on will sort of figure out, which just sort of makes sense. They'll figure out how to sort of, like we've seen in other stories, how to sort of progress towards the future while sort of keeping beliefs in sort of the traditions and sort of the past. So it definitely seems like there definitely is going to be some sort of balancing game that's going to happen later on. But it's just interesting to see how, how in this heated moment after, their father is almost sort of killed, how they're sort of handling sort of these extreme sort of situations, and they're both sort of going to the other sort of ends of the situation here. So it'll definitely be cool to see sort of how this sort of plays out, and just to see, how everyone sort of reacts to this later on, maybe when people have sort of calmed down, or maybe after the next sort of crisis happens.
So next we get this important scene. Melina comes over, and Katara's immediately not particularly happy with her. What are you doing here? Melina says, I swear to you, all those things my brother said, I don't believe them. And Katara just says, any more? And Melina asks, what do you mean? Katara says, you don't believe them anymore. Not after you fell in love with my dad, but what happens when you fall out of love, Melina? And she just says, Katara, it goes deeper than that. And she just says, I'm going to ask you again, what are you doing here? My brother and the rest of my crew were released from custody on the condition that we leave tomorrow. I came to say goodbye to your father. And Katara says, you don't deserve to say goodbye. As Sokka is like, kind of, Katara, that's pretty harsh. And Melina's like, no, no, I get it. As Gran comes out and calls Melina and says, Hakoda wants to see you. And we just cut away from the scene there. That Hakoda and whatever he says next to Melina is going to be pretty important, to the point where they're willing to kind of let this section of the story that be the kind of end point within this book for the kind of present day story. It's definitely interesting in that like the whole core of this is ultimately the, you know, you changed your opinions from being here for a while because you loved my father, but what happens if that relationship doesn't work out? Will you change your opinions again? That we're getting the reference to like what Gilak and Hakoda were talking about. Like Hakoda changed? Has Gilak changed? And Katara's kind of like, okay, change, and like we're trying to change the South here. Will you change again if this is happening here? I will readily admit this isn't the most clear kind of core of what they're going for here, in that there's some conversations that need to happen here, and that I think they're just trying to highlight the fact that Katara feels somewhat betrayed here from trying to make a big effort with Molina, but this kind of big reveal having came out over the course of this book, and her feeling quite betrayed within the situation, and she's not really willing to give Molina that chance again. But obviously, whatever Hakoda has to say next is going to be pretty important. But Greg, what's your take on this kind of final Katara Molina interaction for this book?
Yeah, no, I think this is really sort of interesting just to see, how they're sort of going about, trying to show that Molina actually sort of, cares about the situation. I mean, it seems like they're trying to make it seem like Molina, after, in addition to falling in love with Hakoda, she actually sort of, now actually really sort of cares about the South and sort of their culture overall, which, definitely isn't sort of coming across to Katara in any sort of sense here. She just sees, sort of the betrayal that she sort of had, after, attempting to sort of, see things from her father's sort of point of view here. So you definitely can see sort of, the pain that sort of Molina sort of feels here from the situation. And even, she tries to sort of, accept sort of Katara's sort of ultimatum here, and as far as letting her see her dad one last time here, even though she gets called in. So it'll definitely be interesting to see sort of how this plays out. If she sort of has the ability to sort of stay in the future, sort of what if she leaves completely, how that'll affect Hakoda. Since with everything we've seen together, they really sort of like each other here. So that's definitely gonna, even if Katara doesn't want to sort of affect her dad in any sort of adverse ways, this definitely could, affect him, with her not sort of being there. So it'll be interesting to see sort of, how this plays out, if they're actually even leave the Southern Water Tribe with everything that, could possibly happen later on.
And Kelly, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I thought this was like, I mean, I knew it was kind of gonna happen. Like Melina would want to go say goodbye. Like it, like the idea of this conversation does not surprise me too much. But it's like I said earlier, it's the kind of thing where I'm like, oh, this frustrates me. You don't let her explain. But it went differently than I kind of expected, in the sense that Katara knows that she doesn't feel that way anymore. But she's just holding on to the grudge for the fact that she did. You know what I mean? Like when she's like, anymore. It's like, what do you mean? Well, you only changed because you love my dad. What happens when you don't love my dad? You're just gonna change back? It's like, I don't think that's how it works, Katara. Like, I don't really know. Like it. I don't know, man. Like, is she just saying that because of the whole, like, not liking her dad being in a relationship thing? Is it a mix of that and the no trust? Like I get Katara's mixed feelings here, but at the same time, it also kind of doesn't make sense, because, like, I guess I don't understand Katara's logic here. Then again, she's more using her emotions than looking for logic here. Like, you don't believe them anymore, not after you fell in love with my dad, but what happens when you fall out of love? She really believes that the only reason Molina feels this way is because she's with Hakoda. You know what I mean? And and I guess that's very strange to me, because, like, if Katara would really think about what she's saying, she would be saying that everything that Aang believes in, she only believes in because she's with Aang. But they've always believed in those same things most of the time together, So it's like, where is this logic coming from, Katara? That doesn't make any sense. And even Melina's like, Katara, it goes deeper than that. And I understand Katara being like, look, I'm going to ask you one more time. What are you doing here? What's going on? So I understand that. Like, how are you here? Like, what's going on with the law? But, like, you don't deserve to say goodbye. I was like, crap, Katara. like what the hell? I understand she's upset, but I'm like, good thing Sokka walked over and was like, Katara, what? Like, I don't know. I kind of knew this was gonna happen though, because of the whole, like, Melina wasn't able to explain herself, and and like, misunderstandings and frustration. And I'm just not a big fan of that. I understand conflict, but this is just mean. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, this is just kind of mean and almost uncharacteristic of Katara. And I understand Katara can be mean sometimes. I'm not saying she's like a perfect snowflake or anything, but like saying you don't deserve to say goodbye was like, dude, you know what I mean? Like the relationship is real. You actually do know that. And you know your father loves this woman. So why would you punish your father for her beliefs? Like, you know what I mean? Like she's punishing her own father for saying that. Like I don't quite gel with this. I don't quite understand what they're trying to say here in the comic with Katara's feelings and what's going on. And I like how Hakoda's like, I want to talk to so that's another thing. If Hakoda was able to know Molina was outside, I'm sure he just heard everything Katara just said too. Like how else did Grand like open the door and was like, Molina, Hakoda wants to see you. Like I guess they were just watching through the window. Like like how did Grand know to come outside and call Molina in? They must have heard them. So I'm assuming Hakoda heard everything Katara said too, which is like pretty messed up. So I don't know. I thought it was a little too much.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think like we've praised a lot of the other scenes in this book for how they're written. This one is definitely like they missed the mark a little bit here because effectively what this comes across is that like Katara has no kind of tolerance for people who change their mind. Like that seems to be what they're saying here. That like because you felt this way before, you feeling a way now doesn't mean a lot because you can just change your mind back to that. And that like I think Zuko is another example here. In that like it took a long time, but Katara is friends with Zuko now. That Hakoda used that example. I think it's a pretty good example for Katara as well. She changed her mind on him, and it's pretty interesting that Zuko's arriving in the next comic. We know that Zuko and Quay are arriving here, so it's going to be interesting to see what goes on here. I still ultimately think that Aang needs to be filled in on the situation, and maybe once he knows what's happening, and maybe they have time for a one-on-one conversation where they actually address this stuff, Aang can help Katara in the same way that she helped him, like in the Promise and also the Rift, to deal with like the progress of the Airbenders, and I think he can give her the perspective on progress here. But this scene is very it's interesting to leave off with Katara in this very irrational mood where like you are frustrated with her and how she's dealing with this situation because I think Molina comes across very sympathetic over the course of this book in that the book does I think a really good job at kind of highlighting that like the only thing Molina has really done wrong is maybe not immediately introducing herself as kind of like having slightly different opinions on the South like a couple of months ago potentially, and the fact that she maybe didn't tell everyone and wasn't super upfront with every single person she met, that she feels this way now and that's not good enough for everyone. It's a little bit kind of confusing, but I suppose Greg, do you have any more thoughts?
No.
Mm. So yeah, we get into the last section, which doesn't really have much dialogue, but we cut into the prison cells and we see Gilak and we see the the main female soldier that is part of Hakoda's squad comes in to give him his food, and she says, a few of the other inmates told me about your speech tonight and what you're trying to do, and she basically says, and you make a lot of sense. I've never trusted the Northerners, as she gives him the key to his cell in with his food. So one of Hakoda's key people has betrayed him here to let Gilak out, and he's going to cause some havoc in part 3. Um, this is like the this just feels like to me like a fairly average cliffhanger in that like I think part of it is that we knew that this was happening from the part 3 description. Another part of it is just that like I think part of the problem with this book was that the action happened at a point that kind of hindered us from getting a lot of other important character scenes, and it feels like part 3 could go the same way again. That like Kelly's been like referring to, that we're just gonna get these situations of like Melina is about to explain herself properly to Katara, but Gilak attacks again to stop that from happening, and it's gonna keep doing that and delaying it until the very end of the book when everything's resolved and characters can finally talk to each other. I can see this being a little bit frustrating if it follows that same path. In that, like, I don't hate this cliffhanger. It just it feels like a cliffhanger for the sake of a cliffhanger. In that, like, it's like okay, people are being betrayed. I think it more just highlights the fact that more and more people are believing Gilak, but I think they've almost gone too far in terms of portraying him as an extremist. That like it's kind of hard to understand a little bit. So, um, I think this book kind of like fizzles out a little bit right at the end. That like it kind of slightly mishandles some of the ending stuff, and part of that could just be the format of these books that they have to set up stuff for the next part, and maybe this isn't exactly the way they wanted to portray it if they had the time to just tell us everything. But Greg, what are your thoughts on this as the way they kind of choose to end the book?
I sort of agree that it's definitely not sort of the strongest sort of cliffhanger as we have sort of seen in previous sort of books here. It's just sort of like a okay sort of cliffhanger, and yeah, maybe it is because we know what's going to happen. But I almost sort of forgot about the next sort of description until now of him sort of breaking out again. So this almost seemed like sort of the thing that sort of would happen, that someone sort of would portray. I mean, I don't know if I suspected it to be someone that we knew already that was so close to Hakoda, but I could definitely see him and his crew somehow sort of getting out of jail, just because there doesn't seem like they're setting up, as especially at this point, any other sort of like villain. It's really just this issue at hand is the conflict of this book, of these sort of series of books. So there's nothing else sort of crazy that's sort of going to happen. So somehow it's going to have to involve Gilak in some form or fashion here. So I think it's okay. It definitely makes you sort of curious as sort of what's going to sort of happen, but I think it's more of you're sort of curious of the continuation of the story overall, sort of as of what's sort of just going to happen with the whole situation, rather than with Gilak personally as sort of a character himself. Maybe because we know a bit about him now, more than we know before, but I'm not so sort of enamored with his character that I want to know more about his sort of doing and sort of what he's going to do. I'm just sort of curious to see how the whole sort of situation is going to play out overall. So for me, it's sort of a okay sort of ending here, just sort of with the key sort of being revealed and knowing that he's sort of going to get out and continue on his vendetta.
I mean, I like Gilak as a character in terms of like he's interesting, in that I feel like this book ultimately, like, referring back to his speech, I wish they had emphasized a little bit more the fact that it was the South who fought in the war. Like the North, as far as we were aware, apart from the battle that happened at the very end, which they only participated in because the Fire Nation came to them. The North didn't participate in the war, whereas the South actually ended up basically sacrificing so much of kind of the South to participate in the war and eventually end the war. And he feels that like we gave everything to the war, we basically earned the freedom for the North, and now our reward for that is that we're in a weak state and the North are going to come in and basically take advantage of us. Like, I wish they kind of presented it more like that to make him a little bit more understandable, whereas I think the book kind of way more heavy-handedly presented him as like, I'm going to kill these people because I disagree with them, which is effectively the entire plot of the book. Um, in that I really like that dynamic if they did emphasize that he just feels that the North have done nothing in the war, and they're maybe helping us now, but it's only because they want the oil, and emphasize that aspect a bit more. But Kelly, what are your thoughts on this as the end of the book?
Yeah, it's kind of lackluster in the sense that you kind of saw it coming. Not saw it coming, like I didn't imagine seeing it, but like when you look at it, you're like, I wonder, like as soon as I saw the prison bars, I'm like, someone's gonna let him out. Like I know that's like I don't know why. It didn't surprise me. I think it's just because it's too reminiscent of Tales about not Tales of Bossing Say, just the Bossing Say arc in general, where the Dai Li are still loyal to Long Fang. Like that, like it completely reminded me of that. And I guess I didn't expect like the key right away. Like I didn't know it was like, oh, you're gonna get out of here right away. I thought they were just gonna do like what the Dai Li. I guess they didn't want to be exactly like the Dai Li and like have the order still be followed by people with Gilak in there, because that'd be too reminiscent of Avatar. Although that probably would have been more interesting, because it's like, here's the key, get out. It's like you just got in there. Like, it's just kind of an cliffhanger. Usually the cliffhangers are really good for these books. This one was not very exciting because like you knew it wasn't the end of his story. Like Gillick's got to finish this one way or another, you know, and it doesn't surprise me, I guess I should say. Like most other Avatar comics have a really good way of surprising you. I'm not saying it's not interesting, you know, Gilak being out and going to try to get them again and maybe having a much better plan than drilling a hole in the ground. But like, uh, just in general, it's not surprising, and usually it's surprising. So I'm just kind of like, all right. Like when I realized that was the last page, I was like, oh, really? All
Mm,
right. So yeah, I guess that's just how I feel about that.
mm. And I suppose just as a talking point, I think we should bring up, I suppose, where the South is as we see it in Korra, in that what we see of the South in Korra, I don't think is crazy like advanced. In that it feels like they've more or less what we have here is in essence what we have in Korra. In that the South is still a primarily tribal kind of culture. They're not super advanced. It looks like the main city is the same main city as we have here, mainly, with maybe a few additions in that they do have like a palace and stuff like that. But it didn't really feel like it was like super technological. They had little aspects of things, and that there was no real mention in Korra of like there being like an oil mining thing. So the it like does Korra kind of inform where anything that happens here. The only thing is just that like obviously Unalaq is the chief of both tribes. Now we don't know if the result of this comic is ultimately that the North does take some sort of command over the South, and that's the way it officially works. Um, or if that was just something that Unalaq did, like retaking what was initially the case, and that like we obviously know the origin of the Water Tribes is that the South split from the North initially, and now the North are kind of helping to rebuild. So I suppose Kelly, do you think what we see of the South in Korra in any way kind of hints to the resolution of this here?
Um, I don't know. I don't know if the comics would pay that much attention. Like I know these are approved by Mike and Brian. They look over them or whatever, and they would never do anything that would be really out of really like completely out of lore. You know what I mean? I mean, we still question how those light things were on the. I feel like with the machinery here, they're not paying too much attention. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's still something to keep in mind in the sense that like I still thought it was weird they had that jet ski thing in the last episode, the last comic and the first comic. Remember the two kids who were on
Mm.
the jet ski with the lights? That was actually pretty anachronistic. I couldn't think of a reason for that because they didn't even have electricity. So I was like, what? So we're just gonna pretend that didn't happen. And I kind of feel the same way with however this ends with whatever technology they keep or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't really know. I don't really think that whatever happens in North and whatever happened in Korra Book Two is gonna predict this. To be honest, if anything, it kind of shows how the North and the South are still split in ways because the South is its own thing and the North is its own thing. So it actually kind of points to, if you really want to go by Korra, I guess you could say it kind of points to the North still kind of having a bit of power over the
Mm.
South and there still being like a split. So I don't see a kumbaya anytime soon. There might be kumbaya between Katara and Molina and maybe the closer relationships with Hakoda, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case for the whole tribes.
Yeah, because it's only the end of book two when the South properly gets independence as like its own thing, really. Though we do know just by like Republic City that the South eventually do get a council member on the Republic City Council, so they're given some degree of like individuality, even though the North is still the primary kind of thing to themselves. But Greg, do you think Korra in any way kind of hints as to how this will come to an end here?
I'm not sure to say. I mean, it definitely, I don't know, it would seem that they have sort of a more sort of, I guess maybe a governing body in general, maybe more laws as they have sort of hinted to in this sort of series that, there aren't as many sort of organized way as living here in the South. So maybe that sort of hints to something that, sort of happens as a result of this. There's actually some sort of organizational structure within sort of the government, some sort of hierarchy here, but it definitely doesn't seem like sort of technology wise or anything like that or development wise that they sort of explode after this that would sort of, I guess necessarily lead to them having, sort of like their own sort of industrial sort of revolution sort of here in the South with sort of the earthen refinery or sort of whatever sort of ends up with it. So I don't know if it can really sort of be so telling if they sort of want to lead that far into the future with these sort of comics here. But no, I don't know. Maybe it leads a little bit into it, but it definitely seems like they definitely come out as a better position at the end of the series, I would think.
hmm And our final talking point is just looking a little bit ahead to part three. One of the key things we know in part three that's coming is that Zuko and King Kwai both at some point come down to the south in response to what's going on. Um, the preview seems to kind of slightly indicate that it's because like Gilak is sort of considered like a political prisoner here, in that like some people in the south like disagree with him being imprisoned and think that he should be the leader, and others obviously see him as the extremist, and so we're potentially going to see some moving towards the idea of like a world council and stuff like that. And if we are going to have like all of the world leaders down in the south, we could definitely build towards something. But I don't know if with what we've seen just yet is enough to kind of like justify like all of the world leaders suddenly coming down to the south. If Zuko coming, I assume means Suki is also coming down to the south. I think which is going to be a positive anyway, because then we can get some Sokka Suki relationship stuff if indeed she follows him, which would make sense given that she's his Zuko's bodyguard. So I suppose Greg, any thoughts on like how you think they'll go about introducing Zuko and Quay into part three?
Yeah, I mean, Zuko, I mean, would be a lot easier just because he's, he's part of the group. He's one of their friends, even if he isn't sort of the Fire Nation leader. So, there could be any sort of number of reasons for him. I mean, I guess for Quay, I mean, he's sort of a sort of a random sort of character anyway, so he could always just sort of come down for any sort of old reason, or maybe just because of the involvement with Toph and her sort of company, he could come down as just sort of a general representative of the Earth sort of nation as a whole, and they're just sort of, just as far as just like sort of like unifying just sort of the world in general, it could just be seen as a good look to have sort of all of the sort of, the world leaders here in one sort of location, especially with them sort of, focusing on sort of bringing the South to such a world sort of stage with the Earth and Refinery, or sort of, just in general, just helping them sort of redevelopment, and just, how they, how Hakoda sort of mentions, Zuko and the Fire Nation being, such a, allies now after everything that sort of has happened in the past with the war. So, there could be sort of a number of reasons for them to sort of come down, and it'll definitely be cool just to see, just to see them all together as a group. I think is always interesting to see, and sort of how they all sort of play into this whole sort of situation, this whole sort of conflict here. It'll definitely be interesting just to see sort of the varying sort of opinions that I hope that we sort of get from everyone, and sort of, how they sort of go about actually sort of resolving this whole sort of situation. I think could be really interesting to see how it works out.
Yeah, because it is an interesting point that like basically all of the world leaders kind of know each other by virtue of like being allies as part of the war. So like if this whole plot ultimately is about like how to get the South noticed on the world stage, like two of the key heroes of the war were from the South, and like Aang, I suppose to some degree kind of sees the South as like somewhat of an origin point for him at this point in time. So there's a big connection to the South just because of that. And like I think if there's any like questions about business deals, just purely the fact that there are all these like personal friendships there, I think instantly like kind of goes past the idea that like there could be issues with these business deals, and that like Zuko's like Aang's best friend. They know Quay. Like Quay basically owes most of Team Avatar for what happened in the war, kind of saving him, and so on. The Chief Arnook, I assume, is still the chief in the north. we probably do need to get northern leadership established. Maybe he is also coming down to the south, but they don't feel the need to mention him because he's a kind of more minor character. But that would be nice to see. But I suppose, Kelly, what are your thoughts on this? How do you think they'll go about introducing Zuko and Quay into part three?
Honestly, I don't know. It's very strange to me that Quay is involved in this too. Zuko, I sort of get because he's part of the whole group, kind of like Toph and Aang or whatever. Even I still think that's kind of like, all right, we need everybody to come here. What kind of insanity is going to happen? Like, what can Gilak really do to put the entire Southern Water Tribe in jeopardy to have every single world leader come to the Southern Water Tribe at the same time? I don't know. It seems very strange to me, and I really hope they manage to pull it off, because right now it seems kind of ridiculous, especially Quay too. Like, him too? What does he have to do with this? You know what I mean? Like, what do either of them have to do with it? Like, how does Gilak end up? I guess it's the idea that we're trying to have more unification in the world, and that if one major nation is in serious trouble, the other leader should get involved. You know what I mean? Like kind of similar to the promise and what was going on with that city and like but that had relation to the Fire Nation and the Earth Kingdom. This doesn't have any relation to the Fire Nation and the Earth Kingdom outside of the Fire, Earth, and Refinery, which is a private mechanical business, not something world leaders would be necessarily running over for. So, I have no idea why they would come over. Maybe it's just a cameo. Maybe they
Mm.
invent Morse code and they don't actually physically show up. I have no idea. It just seems really weird to me. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to
Yeah.
handle it. I don't think it makes any sense.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of questions going into this one. In that, like as you say, Gilak, even if he gets out, like what sort of a threat really is he? Because like basically Katara, Aang, and Toph just alone are powerful enough to take out like his entire army. Like they're just that powerful as kind of characters. We've seen that in both of the books. Part one, it just took Katara and Sokka together to get out of his forces with all of them there. In this book, it was basically the three of them, and they beat everyone. So adding like Zuko into that, he doesn't really have a threat unless they do something where like they're really trying to create a rift between our characters, and that like we'll have characters like choose sides and be disagreeing with each other to the point where they're on opposite sides of things. I don't see us getting quite to that stage, in that even towards the end of this book they try and sort of do that with Sokka and Katara, but I ultimately don't think they're going to ever full on kind of commit to like they're on opposite sides of the issue and are like arguing with each other over what to do. I think stuff will happen to the point where like that doesn't quite get to that stage. But either way, so we'll just end with I suppose our kind of final thoughts on it now that we've kind of properly discussed it. You know, how good is this book kind of compared to the previous books we've had, previous part twos and stuff like that. Greg, overall, you know that we've discussed it. How do you rank this one? I suppose.
I mean, I like it. I definitely don't not like it. But I mean, I don't know. For me, I think this is it's so okay sort of middle book. I mean, it definitely sort of keeps the story going along. It moves the plot points. It introduces us to some characters that we've been expecting, and I think the slower moments of this book are actually done pretty well. Sort of the conversations that we have with like Katara and her father. I think those are done pretty well. So I like how those are sort of, situating and setting up the rest of the situations that come in the book. I mean, I don't know. I think the situation overall is pretty interesting. Maybe it could use a bit more sort of, I don't know, maybe clarification on sort of what their sort of end goals are. Maybe that could sort of help it out overall. But I think it's an okay sort of book number two. I mean, I don't know. I think I sort of like some of the other sort of books too, as far as ranking them sort of higher than this one. But I think it's pretty cool, and I'm liking how it's taking the story overall.
Yeah, like I think there's a lot of really good stuff in here. As we said, I think the Hakoda Katara scene and how it transitions into the Katang reunion is one of the best written kind of scenes we've kind of really seen in the comics. I like how they execute the key plot point of like Gilak's speech and the impact that has on Molina and Malik. That's really well done. It's just right towards the end they fail to kind of, I suppose, leave us in a position where we can really speculate a lot about what's happening in part three. We're just kind of like, okay, Katara's in a kind of bad mood with Melina, but we don't exactly know why, because the dialogue was a little messy towards the end. Um, and then I just, as I said at the start, I still feel that like this part two has kind of left a lot for part three to do. In that Aang and Toph felt a little bit like we got a few too many characters here, and we're introducing like two more pretty major characters in the next book, plus trying to resolve the plot. I'm kind of worried that we may be running out of time, but I think ultimately I suppose what this book has done is like this story perhaps isn't as big as maybe we think it is, and that I think the core of part three will be just about, there will be a lot of dialogue of characters talking. I don't think there'll be that much action. It will be a lot of dialogue. I think we'll get more scenes kind of like the middle of this book. Probably towards the end we will get more scenes like the Hakoda Katara scenes with maybe with Melina involved, maybe a Malik Melina moment and addressing their relationship and stuff like that. But overall I'd say like this book isn't going to blow anyone's mind when they read it, but it is good. It's a solid edition, and it's made me excited for part three. But we've had better part twos, and I think overall we've had better books. But I will say it also has some of the best writing we've seen in the comics. But Kelly, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you guys have been saying. Like, there's a lot of really good things in this comic with the writing and the characters and kind of what's going on, but it kind of has left us with more questions and answers in regards to what this third book is going to be. Like you said, it's like they have a lot to do in this third book, and the last part is kind of messy. I don't like it. I just kind of don't like those last couple scenes. Not only is the Gilak escaping prison thing kind of, well, duh, and not that exciting, but also the things that Katara is saying to Molina, even though you do understand Katara's frustration with the situation and her feelings, it just still doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It seems very hypocritical, and I don't know. But there's also really good scenes, like Hakoda and Katara speaking with each other. It was just really well done. And even the page 71, you're starting to finally get into the meat of this Katara and Sokka rift of like what they both believe in. And I'm just hoping that why am I saying season? That book 3, the third book, is able to pull off, having a more developed Sokka opinion with Katara, with then whatever's going on with Gilak, bringing Zuko and Kui into the mix, and then, Malik and Molina. How are they going to talk about what Malik did? Is it Malik that's going to go to jail? Is Molina going to go free? There's so much to do in the third book. You're right, Morgan. It's like, well, what's gonna happen? The stabbing part was really insane. That was again another, I don't want to say highlight. It was bad that he got hurt, but like the fact that they like took that route, you know what I mean? Like hurt him really bad. That was a really big shocker. And the fighting was really good. There is a lot of good going on in this comic, but at the same time, it leaves me more skeptical of the third book than excited, actually. So that's not a very good positive. I mean, I still highly recommend this. If you started the first one, get into the second one, you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing that will be like, oh, well, now I hate this book, you know what I mean? Nothing that will like completely deter you, but there are some concerns up ahead, and I don't dislike it by any means, but it's one of the more messy part twos. Then again, part twos have been pretty messy in the past, so maybe that's being too harsh. I don't know.
Yeah, like I do think we have tended to say that with most part twos, that like, oh, part 3 has a lot to do, but it's usually done it quite well, and they've managed to do everything effectively, and I can't see why they're going to miss the mark on this one. Now, I suppose to finish it up, thankfully we don't have as long to wait for part 3. I think it was like a 4-month break between part 1 and part 2. It's only 3 months between 2 and 3, and that it's April 26th, I believe, is the comic book store release date. So, by the time of release, it is literally 3 months away from release. So that is not too bad, in that I think that time should kind of go by a lot quicker than usual, because it was a hugely long wait for part 2, and only getting the preview like 5 days before the book came out. A lot of people were quite frustrated with that, and it's good that part 3 isn't too far away, and then by the time we're in part 3, we're getting closer to Turf Wars, the first Korra comic, and comics should be a lot more regular after that. But yeah, that's been the podcast special. I suppose in terms of like contacting us about your opinions on the book, use the email address avataronlinepodcast@gmail.com. Send in your thoughts on North and South Part 2, and next time we have an Avatar show, we'll kind of discuss a little bit more of our thoughts on the book, as well as kind of what other people are thinking about the book as well. But yeah, that's been the Avatar Online Podcast special for North and South Part 2. It's been myself, Greg, and Kelly. Thanks for listening to this podcast, and bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.